Have you ever imagined being reborn into a novel? Well, Rory had. Worse still, after she had spent years raising a budding tyrant into a sweet, gentle boy, she was suddenly assassinated, and then transported into another life all over again. In the dimly lit room, heartbreaking sobs echoed through the air as Prince Thierry gripped Rory's hand tightly, tears streaming down his face. When Rory slowly opened her eyes, his face was blurred with tears. Rory said, "You scared me half to death. I thought you would never wake up again." Rory smiled weakly, gently reassuring him that she was only a little exhausted. But Thierry's eyes were still filled with unease. He trembled as he begged her, "Rory, you'll never leave me, right? Promise me." How could she refuse those pitiful eyes? Rory gently pressed her forehead to his, quietly promising to stay by his side for as long as he needed her. But the truth was, she was not the original Rory. In her past life, she had simply been an unlucky reader who slipped and fell down a staircase while reading a novel called One Wish. When she woke, she was stunned to find herself inside the body of a lowly maid in the Podia Empire, one fated to die a horrible death at the hands of the male lead. And that male lead was none other than Thierry. According to the original plot, the original Rory had accidentally destroyed a keepsake belonging to Thierry's mother, sending him into a fury so great it awakened his flame power and turned him into a cruel tyrant. To keep her fragile new life, she had decided to change the story. For 6 long years, she poured all her love into caring for, comforting the boy, making sure not a single seed of resentment could ever take root. And as a result, the boy once destined to become a tyrant had grown into nothing more than a clingy crybaby devoted to her. The one thing that still nagged at her was this. Without that psychological shock, would his power have ever awakened at all? Just as Rory sank into thought, the creak of the door suddenly broke the silence. Thierry turned his head to look. But no, a mysterious dark figure lunged at her instead, a rough hand pressing a drug-soaked cloth straight over her face. Rory struggled in desperation, her breath choking off, and everything went black in an instant. In that final moment before death, she thought in a panic, was this really how she was going to die so pathetically? She jolted awake, gasping for breath. Only seconds ago, she had been fighting for her life. But the room around her was no longer the shabby maid's quarters. It was an extraordinarily lavish chamber. A middle-aged man in noble attire rushed to her side, calling her Alicia and thanking the heavens that his daughter had finally woken. Daughter? Rory was utterly bewildered, as she looked, trembling, at her reflection in the mirror. Golden hair shimmering, eyes a brilliant emerald green. This was not her body at all. She pinched her own cheek hard. It hurt. This was not a dream. She had only just accepted her tragic fate of being murdered, and now she had opened her eyes among a sea of complete strangers. Could this possibly be her second reincarnation? In the blink of an eye, a month had passed since she woke up in this new body. The entire castle was awash in tears of joy. The old royal physician and the maids all wept and sobbed, calling her recovery after 7 years in a coma nothing short of a miracle. Seeing them like this, Alicia smiled gently and offered her heartfelt thanks for everyone's tireless care. The old physician, wiping away his tears, said bashfully that if this had been the old her, she'd have snapped at everyone and thrown them all out by now. Hearing that, Alicia gave a small start. So the real princess had before this been quite an unpleasant person? Back in her room, Alicia began piecing everything together. 7 years ago, the youngest daughter of King Astat had been struck by lightning and fallen into a deep coma. And coincidentally, that was the very same night Rory had lost her life. Her heart had started beating again, her eyes had opened. But why only after a full 7 years? 1,000 questions swarmed her mind. What had become of the boy who used to be afraid of the dark? Thierry was 20 now. 3 years ago, he had launched a bloody rebellion and crowned himself emperor. So the original plot had unfolded after all. But then why had she been killed that night? If Thierry was safe and unharmed, then the assassin's real target must have been a lowly maid. The more she thought about it, the more her head throbbed. Her new life had completely derailed from the novel's plot. What would happen if she simply cut all ties with Thierry? After all, the only reason she had devoted herself to caring for him back then was to protect her own fragile life. The memory of the boy crying, begging her never to leave, flashed through her mind, but Alicia quickly brushed it aside. He must have met the female lead by now, and sooner or later he would forget all about a maid from his childhood. Going their separate ways was probably for the best. He would be fine. Definitely. she told herself, forcing the door of the past shut once more. At the royal family's dinner table, the atmosphere grew awkward as Alicia kept treating everyone with stiff formality. Watching his flustered little sister, her golden-haired older brother Harrison burst out laughing and teased her. He wondered aloud whether she had taken etiquette classes in her sleep for the past 7 years, given how completely different she seemed now. Honestly, he said with a smile, he liked this new side of her much better. Talking to her before had been like talking to a wall. But now she was so much easier to be around. Seeing his daughter being teased, the king immediately jabbed back, making Harrison flush red and deny it up and down. The family's mood soon warmed, filling the room with laughter. But before the smiles could fade, the atmosphere abruptly turned heavy. The eldest brother mentioned suspicious figures spotted near the border, with every sign pointing toward the Podia Empire. At the mention of the name Podia, Alicia's heart skipped a beat. The king sighed with worry. The Emperor of Podia was a man who stopped at nothing, and if they weren't careful, a devastating war could break out. Harrison frowned, saying they should simply comply with the man's demands to avoid ruin. But the king shook his head helplessly. It was a demand they could not fulfill. As far as he knew, the man was hunting relentlessly for the whereabouts of a fairy. A fairy? Alicia's pupils contracted sharply. In the original story, Thierry's mother had been a fairy. Harrison slammed his fist on the table in fury, calling it absurd. How were they supposed to know the whereabouts of a species that had already gone extinct? And that, the king said bitterly, was exactly why war was unavoidable. Any nation that refused the emperor's demand had ultimately been burned to ash. Hearing this, Alicia froze. Would Thierry really go to war and destroy her kingdom? Whispers spread through every corner of the palace. The neighboring kingdom of Teheo had fallen the year before, and now the Podia Empire's next target was none other than Astat. Rumor had it that the Tyrant Emperor was ruthlessly hunting down a fairy. Standing behind a wall, Alicia listened in silence. Astat was a peaceful kingdom nestled in the far north, blanketed in snow all year round. But what made it truly special was that the royal bloodline could commune with the elements of nature. Could it be that Thierry believed his father, through his bond with nature, knew the fairy's whereabouts? Was he searching for clues about his late mother? But why did it have to be here, of all places? Just as she thought she might finally live in peace in her new identity, trouble was already circling back. Alicia's head throbbed with worry. She had scoured countless books trying to understand why she had been reborn a second time, but found not a single clue. If she sought help from the sages, wouldn't there be a risk her false identity as a princess would be exposed? Lost deep in her tangled thoughts, Alicia hadn't even noticed she had wandered into the middle of a dense forest. Rustle, rustle, a strange sound rang out, and a chill ran down her spine. A pair of red eyes glowed in the bushes. With a roar, a massive jet-black beast with jagged fangs lunged straight out of the darkness. Alicia screamed at the top of her lungs and toppled backward onto the grass. In utter panic, she squeezed her eyes shut, curling into a ball and playing dead. 1 second, 2 seconds passed. No sound of tearing flesh, no growling, only an eerie silence. Instead, a warm, wet tongue began licking repeatedly at her cheek. Alicia trembled and cracked her eyes open. The enormous beast was panting with its tongue lolling out, looking at her with an utterly innocent expression. It looked nothing like a bloodthirsty wild wolf, but more like an oversized puppy begging for attention. She studied it closely, its jet-black fur, its glowing golden eyes. The image felt strangely familiar, and a memory from 7 years ago suddenly came rushing back. Back then, the maid Rari and the timid young Thierry had stumbled upon an injured wolf pup. Unlike his usual withdrawn self, Thierry had been utterly delighted. He had tamed the little wolf himself and brought it home to raise. She still remembered vividly the bright smile on Thierry's face when she suggested the name Rue, meaning proud wolf. Back in the present, 7 years felt like a distant dream. And now the giant wolf before her let out a howl that echoed through the forest. It was strangely gentle toward this stranger. What's more, it looked astonishingly like Rue. Could it really be you, Rue? Alicia whispered. Suddenly, a tall man stepped out from the shadow of the trees. A black cloak covered him head to toe, yet it could not hide his eyes, blood red, deep, and cold. A low, commanding voice broke the stillness. "Are you hungry?" Alicia's heart nearly stopped, her eyes unable to look away from that imposing figure. One question screamed through her mind. Who on earth is this man? The mysterious man's crimson gaze fixed on Alicia, and she couldn't help but shudder. To make matters worse, the massive wolf was still pinning her down, leaving her only able to plead desperately for it to move. Alicia forced herself to stay calm, sternly reminding him this was forbidden royal territory, and demanded to know his identity. But her only answer was a heavy, oppressive silence. Strangely, the fierce beast from before suddenly lay down obediently the moment the man drew near. "You must be this wolf's owner," Alicia probed. The man answered coldly, gently stroking the wolf. "You could say that." But when she asked for the wolf's name, his answer was bizarre in the extreme. Who knows? It lost its name the moment it lost its true master. Instinct screamed that this man was dangerous, and Alicia carefully tried to find a way to slip away. But the instant she turned to leave, the wolf suddenly barked, then let out a howl. The howl drew the man closer, right up to Alicia. He leaned down so close she could feel the chill of his breath against her skin. "What did you do to make it go this wild?" Alicia was so frightened her voice came out in a barely audible mumble, as she tried to explain that the wolf was probably just friendly toward strangers. Inside, she was screaming at him not to take another step closer. Then their eyes met, and her heart pounded, thump, thump, over and over. Staring deep into Alicia's blue eyes, a flash of memory swept through his mind, the radiant smile of the maid Rari from years long past. The man froze, his pupils contracting. A sudden, splitting headache struck him, drawing out a low groan of pain as he clutched his forehead. The sharp, cold look in his eyes was instantly veiled by a layer of indescribable, misty melancholy. After the man walked away, Alicia let out a soft sigh of relief, but her heart still hadn't settled after that haunting gaze. That night, in a fitful, restless sleep, Alicia was pulled into a nightmare. She saw young Thierry standing there crying, accusing her of breaking her promise and abandoning him. She wanted to scream out an explanation, but her throat felt choked and bitter. With a click, the bedroom door burst open. A rough hand shook her hard. "Alicia, wake up now," it was Harrison's voice. Her brother stood there in a black cloak, his face deadly serious. Before she could even grasp what was happening, Harrison threw a cloak over her and dragged her running full speed down the corridor. Their destination was the throne room, which held a secret escape passage. As the two siblings rushed into the throne room, the king and their eldest brother Fidel were already waiting there. Every face was ashen. The king announced shocking news. The army of Podia had breached the palace. Alicia's heart clenched. Had Thierry truly come here himself, leading his own troops? Since her powers had not yet awakened, the king ordered her to flee at once with the servants. But how could she possibly abandon her family? Just then, a guard rushed in to report, only to be run through the chest by a sword an instant later, blood spraying everywhere. The throne room doors exploded open. Out of the swirling smoke stepped a painfully familiar figure. He wore imperial armor, gripping a blazing sword, his crimson eyes radiating a killing intent that reached the sky. "Stay right where you are," he said. "If anyone dares set foot outside this room, I will burn this entire palace to ash." Alicia went numb with shock, realizing the man in imperial armor was the very same stranger she had encountered in the forest the day before. Facing down the tyrant, King Astat roared furiously, demanding to know the Podia Emperor's true intentions. Thierry only curled his lips into a cruel half-smile. He said calmly that if he could set fire to his own palace with his own hands, then torching someone else's meant nothing to him at all. His cruelty sent a chill down Alicia's spine. But what left her even more shaken was the color of his eyes. In her memory, young Thierry had once had soft, gentle gray eyes. These crimson eyes were undeniable proof that he had awakened the flame power of the Podia royal bloodline entirely without her help. The murderous aura radiating off him matched everything described in the novel perfectly. Alicia clapped a trembling hand over her mouth. This cruel, ruthless man truly was Thierry. King Astat refused to yield. He gathered every ounce of his magic, condensing an immense force of water elemental power, forming raging, powerful waves meant to extinguish his enemies' flames. The sheer magnificent power protecting the kingdom left Alicia awestruck. Yet against that furious assault, Thierry only smirked with interest. Boom! A deafening explosion shook the entire palace, as Thierry's raging flames swallowed the water whole, incinerating everything in the blink of an eye. He stood there, completely unscathed, coldly mocking the king's power as far too weak. Seeing his father wounded, Harrison drew his sword in fury an emerald wind swirling around the blade as he prepared to charge into a fight to the death. Just as the air seemed ready to explode, a silver-haired man in glasses stepped calmly into the throne room. It was Vakun Duis, advisor to the Emperor of Podia. Vakun calmly proposed a temporary ceasefire, his tone gracious and courteous yet laced with an unmistakable threat. He reminded the royal family of Astat that they had better make the most of this mercy before their last chance slipped away. Though Harrison fiercely objected, the king, remaining rational, held his son back. He knew all too well this was a battle they could not win. Vakun smiled with satisfaction and laid out his condition. Princess Alicia would go to the Podia Empire as a hostage. In exchange, the kingdom of Astat would only need to fulfill one single request from them. Alicia was stunned. Why would they go through so much trouble just to use her as a bargaining hostage? The king, clutching his aching head, insisted once again that he truly knew nothing about the fairy's whereabouts. His words were met only with Thierry's contemptuous sneer. Your ignorance, he said, would seal the fate of your entire kingdom. Looking at Thierry, Alicia saw a complete stranger standing before her, nothing like the sweet, gentle boy she had once known. If they kept resisting, everything would be reduced to ash by his flames. No one here stood a chance against this brutal power. With the line between life and death drawn razor-thin, Alicia took a deep breath and stepped forward resolutely, to the shock of her father and brothers. I'll go, she said, ignoring her family's desperate cries to stop her. Alicia turned back and gave a gentle yet firmly resolved smile. This was the only way to save everyone, and more importantly, she herself wanted to keep living too. She told herself that being stubborn now would only make things worse. Her top priority had to be keeping her family safe. Thierry's lips curved slightly, pleased that someone finally understood reason, but the tense silence was suddenly shattered by a rustling sound. The massive wolf Rue slipped past Thierry and bolted straight toward Alicia. The guards cried out in alarm, terrified the fragile princess was about to be torn apart. But instead of attacking her, Rue nuzzled its head against Alicia with unmistakable affection. Watching the enormous wolf act as tame as a puppy, the guards and even the advisor Vakun stared in disbelief. Alicia smiled softly and stroked its head. Reason told her to pretend to be afraid, but seeing Rue's joyful eyes, she couldn't bring herself to hide her feelings. Maybe it truly had recognized her as Rari. From behind them, Thierry's crimson eyes stayed fixed on this strange exchange. At last, Alicia clearly declared that she accepted the Emperor's demand and would follow him back to the Podia Empire. As they walked under escort, Vakun teased that this whole affair was nothing short of a princess kidnapping. If this isn't a kidnapping, then what is? Alicia thought sarcastically to herself. Looking back, she saw her father and brothers weeping as though at a funeral. Having lived through 2 reincarnations, even though her time with them had been brief, she could still feel the warmth of their love and the boundless affection they held for the real princess. Alicia waved goodbye, silently wishing them peace. The carriage creaked and began to roll forward. But Alicia nearly lost her mind when she realized Thierry was sitting right across from her. His cold, sharp gaze made her tremble. She sighed inwardly. It had been a month since she'd woken up in this body, and she still couldn't believe that the sweet boy from before had become such a ruthless tyrant. Noticing Alicia stealing glances at him, Thierry spoke up coldly. Princess, why are you staring at me so intently? You've grown remarkably bold since escaping death. My red eyes are a reminder to you of your own approaching end. Alicia started. She had only been looking because his crimson eyes were such a strikingly unique sign of his royal power awakening. But why did he always connect his eyes to some sort of omen? Seeing her confusion, Thierry gave a cold laugh. Don't make me ask you twice. Cornered, Alicia blurted out without thinking. I was simply surprised to hear you call your red eyes an omen. Eye color, she said, was actually determined entirely by the amount of melanin pigment in the iris. Thierry froze, his pupils contracted in astonishment. He stared at her intently. Melanin. How could you possibly know that word? Oh no, this is bad, Alicia thought, breaking into a cold sweat. She had forgotten that such a scientific concept didn't even exist in this world. Under his probing gaze, she hastily covered by claiming she had simply come across it by chance in an old family book. Luckily, a guard's announcement that they had reached the magic teleportation gate saved Alicia just in time. She hurried to get out of the carriage, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere. Thierry stared silently at that smile. His expression shifted all at once, his inner turmoil raging. Why, he wondered, did he keep seeing her image in this woman? Using the magic teleportation gate, Alicia arrived at the Podia Empire within a single day. But her new body, untrained and frail, couldn't withstand the immense pressure of the magic, and she fell ill, bedridden for 3 full days. The room assigned to her was in the East Palace, an extravagant place set close to the main Imperial Palace. Since that carriage ride, she hadn't seen Thierry again. Even though she knew he must have heard she was sick, she didn't expect him to visit. In the end, in this game of power, she was nothing more than a bargaining pawn. While lost in thought, a respectful voice suddenly cut in. It was Countess Ante, the head steward of the Imperial Palace. Beside her stood a neat, red-haired maid named Mary Diana. "It's my honor to serve the princess," Mary said, bowing awkwardly but with genuine sincerity. Watching the small, clumsy maid, Alicia couldn't help smiling to herself, reminded of a certain red-haired girl named Anne. She wondered whether Thierry had assigned Mary to her as a gesture of goodwill, or to plant a pair of eyes and ears to monitor her every move. Just as Alicia was about to keep chatting with Mary, Countess Ante suddenly cut in, suggesting they take Alicia out for a walk. The suspicious intervention made Alicia wonder if the woman was following Thierry's orders to keep her from growing too close to the servants. Still, Alicia smiled and agreed readily. She needed to lower the other woman's guard so she could act more freely without being watched so closely. The Countess allowed the walk, on the condition that Mary stay close by her side at all times. But before they left, the Countess couldn't resist adding an ominous warning. Never, under any circumstances, go near the villa deep in the forest. That place, she said, was a maze of trees where strangers easily got lost. On top of that, she brought in a whole new wardrobe of luxurious gowns by the Emperor's order, claiming Alicia's own clothes were far too plain. When the maid Mary excused herself for a moment to fetch a parasol, Alicia stood alone, a deep sense of suspicion welling up inside her. If the Countess truly didn't want her going near that villa, why would she bother bringing it up at all? Was she secretly trying to spark Alicia's curiosity, hoping she'd walk right into a trap? Alicia strolled along the corridors of the East Palace, a place known as the Gallery Palace for the countless priceless paintings lining its walls. The grand scenery suddenly brought Maid to mind, the kind kitchen maid and her only friend from her past life, who used to sneak her bread to eat. She wondered how Maid was doing now, silently promising herself she'd go find her one day. As she walked on, Alicia suddenly overheard whispers from a group of maids nearby. At first, they were simply gossiping about how beautiful the foreign princess was, and whether the Emperor was truly interested in her. But then the conversation took an entirely different turn. The Emperor, they said, had only ever been devoted to one person, his childhood maid, Rari. Wasn't that her name? Hearing the name of her past life, Alicia froze in place, her heart skipping a beat. Immediately, another maid hissed in alarm, "Are you out of your mind? That name is forbidden. Anyone caught even saying her name gets executed on the spot." Apparently, things ended very badly between them. Executed? What? Alicia was utterly stunned. She and Thierry had once been extremely close. How had the rumors become so twisted? But what came next shattered her completely. The maids leaned in close, whispering to one another. "I heard that maid betrayed the young prince and fled in the night with stolen money." Betrayal and running away? Alicia stood rooted to the spot, her mind reeling. So in everyone's eyes, and perhaps even Thierry's, she had become the cruel traitor who abandoned him. Though deeply shaken by the vicious rumors she'd just overheard, Alicia still forced herself to go outside for a walk to get some fresh air. But the peace didn't last long before, with a rustle, the enormous wolf Rue suddenly bounded out of nowhere and leapt straight at her. The maid Mary screamed in terror, trying to shield her, certain the beast was about to attack. But instead, Rue proved completely harmless, tongue lolling out, panting happily, nuzzling affectionately into her lap for attention. Looking at its massive frame paired with the soul of an obedient puppy, Alicia smiled and stroked its head gently. The joy in Rue's eyes and its affectionate licks on her cheek convinced her the wolf truly had recognized her as Rari. The presence of the little wolf from years ago acted like a soothing balm, helping her momentarily forget all the tension of the past hour. But that moment of peace was quickly shattered by footsteps approaching from behind. "Seems you really know how to tame him, doesn't it?" Alicia startled and turned around. It was Thierry. She quickly bowed her head in proper etiquette. Thierry stepped closer, his crimson eyes cold enough to be frightening. He remarked calmly that he'd nearly started preparing her funeral, and it would be quite troublesome if the ceasefire fell apart just because the hostage princess got sick and died. Listen to the physician and behave yourself properly. Alicia wept silently inside. Where has my sweet crybaby little Thierry gone? Give me back my little Thierry. Just then, Rue nuzzled affectionately against her again, and Alicia burst out laughing at how adorable it was. Trying to soothe the wolf, who was excitedly licking all over her face. Out of pure instinct from her past life, Alicia raised 2 fingers into the shape of a gun and said, "Bang!" And instantly, Rue dropped down to the ground with impressive flair. The Maid Mary looked baffled, unsure what had just happened, while Alicia blushed with embarrassment, explaining it was just a little trick for calming dogs. But suddenly, a tall, dark shadow loomed over her. Thierry snapped in fury. "Who do you think you are? Who gave you the right to do that?" Alicia went pale. Thierry stared intently at her hand, demanding to know what shape she had just made. When she stammered that it was a gun, his gaze grew even colder. Alicia tried to save the situation, hastily changing the subject by praising Rue for being such a smart wolf, quick to understand. But she had no idea she had just made a fatal mistake. "Rue, is it?" Thierry's voice dropped low. "How do you know its name?" His question hit her like a bolt from the blue. Alicia flinched, clapping a hand over her mouth, but it was too late. He pressed her, demanding an answer. In a panic, she lied evasively, claiming she'd only overheard it in passing from someone she didn't even know. Thierry gave a mocking smile. He tore her clumsy lie apart, pointing out that she'd been bedridden in the East Palace for days. There was no way she could have overheard a name that had been forbidden all this time. "You've followed me without resistance this whole time," he said. "Are you here for some other purpose entirely?" Under Thierry's suffocating pressure, Alicia panicked completely. Why was he so sensitive about this particular name? Could it be that he truly believed the rumors that Rari had betrayed and abandoned him? Her heart ached bitterly. She wanted to scream that she had never abandoned him, but she had to hold it back. Sensing his master was under threat, Rue suddenly growled fiercely, leaping in front of Alicia and baring its fangs at Thierry. Thierry stared in shock at his own loyal beast, now turning to protect a total stranger. He gave a cold laugh, wondering if even his wolf had gone mad. But looking into Alicia's eyes and witnessing Rue's loyalty, an image of Rari from years past suddenly flashed through Thierry's mind. His crimson eyes flickered, clouded with a wistful, melancholy sadness. He stood there in silence, wondering whether it was actually him who had lost his mind. Sweet memories from the past came rushing back. Back then, she and Thierry used to sneak off together for picnics under the shade of the trees. Even though their portions were meager, she always gave him the bigger share, apologizing guiltily for not being able to prepare a proper meal for a growing boy. But young Thierry back then would only smile gently and say softly, "Why are you apologizing? I don't mind having less food, even if I had to live here my whole life, as long as you're by my side." That radiant spring sunshine smile of Thierry's back then had warmed her heart. But looking at him now, Alicia couldn't help but ache inside and wonder, "Thierry, what happened to you?" Everything he remembered of her now was tainted by the stain of betrayal. A rustling sound from the bushes cut through her thoughts, and a handsome young man in an elegant military uniform stepped out. He introduced himself as Oscar Bellick, deputy commander of the Royal Knights, and offered to sit and rest with her for a while. Though Alicia politely agreed on the surface, inwardly she couldn't help thinking this deputy commander didn't seem entirely trustworthy. Seeing Rue curled up affectionately beside Alicia, Oscar was utterly astonished. This wolf, he said, was famously ferocious. It had never once shown respect even to the Emperor. Yet here it was, behaving like a tame little pet. Just then someone approached, wanting to speak with him privately. Alicia discreetly watched and realized it was Vakun, approaching Oscar to assign him as Princess Alicia's personal bodyguard. At first, Oscar flatly refused, insisting he was a mighty warrior, not suited to playing bodyguard. But Vakun needed only a few well-placed compliments about Oscar's strength and courage to reel him right in. Vakun even pretended to back off, using the trick to bait him further, which made Oscar puff out his chest with pride, declaring no one was more capable than him and snatching up the assignment. Watching the whole performance unfold, Alicia was left speechless. This mighty, valiant deputy commander had turned out to be so easily spun around like a top by Vakun. After successfully baiting his trap, Vakun returned to the Emperor's study to report. Thierry was still deep in his paperwork and asked without looking up whether Oscar had sent Vakun off. When Vakun reported that Oscar had been assigned as the princess's bodyguard, he flashed a knowing smile and added an extra little detail that he'd happened to see Oscar and the princess together earlier. They looked quite close, he said, sitting casually on the grass as though it were their own backyard. At this, Thierry's pen froze mid-stroke. He asked in a low voice, "They were sitting down together?" Vakun pushed up his glasses with smug satisfaction, pouring more fuel on the fire. "Yes," he said. "They got along so well I nearly mistook them for a married couple from a past life." Crack. Thierry's fist clenched, the veins on his hand bulging with fury, and a flash of chilling killing intent flickered in the Tyrant Emperor's crimson eyes. "What did you just say? A married couple?" Unfazed, Vakun leaned in even closer, asking whether it was possible the princess had stirred something in him precisely because she resembled his old maid so closely. Boom. Thierry slammed his fist on the desk, snapping furiously at Vakun to shut his mouth. But Vakun only calmly reminded him that if he truly cared for the princess, he ought to be honest about it, or one day someone else would sweep her right out from under him. Thierry clenched his fist quietly. The one regret of his entire life was leaving Rari alone that fateful night. To cut through the suffocating tension, Thierry tapped lightly on the desk, urging Vakun to focus instead on investigating the arson case in the slums, where 12 people had burned to death under deeply suspicious circumstances before the fire even broke out. Not stopping there, Vakun also reported that Duke Rupert was pressuring the Emperor to marry in order to strengthen the empire. Thierry stayed silent, clearly annoyed. Noticing his cold expression, Vakun was about to tease him further about the princess, but Thierry immediately drew his sword in warning. The advisor quickly backed down and turned serious to reveal an extremely crucial clue. "Do you still remember," he said, "the faint traces of magic I once detected near the kingdom of Astat? I went back to investigate. On the exact day that strange surge of magic appeared, Princess Alicia suddenly woke from her 7-year coma." The bizarre coincidence left Thierry deep in thought, as though the pieces of a puzzle were slowly clicking into place. Meanwhile, at the East Palace, Alicia lay exhausted across her bed. She silently marveled at how childish Oscar and Vakun had been the day before, bickering like kids even in front of a foreign princess. A knock came at the door, and Mary entered with an urgent announcement. The Emperor wished to invite her to dinner with him. "Dinner?" Alicia asked wearily. "Fine. When?" "Tonight, my lady. He's asked to meet you in the main dining hall in 30 minutes. "What? Only half an hour?" Alicia cried out in dismay at the tyrant's sudden, inconsiderate notice. Stepping into the dazzling dining hall in a proud pink gown, Alicia was immediately scolded by Thierry for being late. Inside, she silently screamed with indignation. How was she supposed to be blamed for anything when she'd only had exactly 30 minutes to get ready? As she sat down at the table, Alicia had assumed she wouldn't be able to swallow a single bite. But what caught her eye instead was Thierry, devastatingly attractive in a loosely worn silk shirt, revealing a toned chest and defined abs. Alicia blushed furiously and quickly shook her head to banish the shameless thoughts creeping into her mind. She reminded herself firmly not to get distracted. This man before her was the very boy Thierry she had raised with her own hands. Besides, he clearly didn't care about Rari anymore. She needed to stay sharp to protect her own life, and absolutely could not let her guard down in front of him. Thierry calmly cut into his meat, breaking the silence with an unhurried, warm voice. "I don't eat people, you know," he said. "Why do you seem so uncomfortable being near me?" Flustered, Alicia insisted she was perfectly comfortable. There was nothing wrong at all. Thierry glanced at her and made a sharp remark. "You certainly have a lot of nerve." Stung right where it hurt, Alicia quickly lowered her head. She thought to herself, if Thierry were ever born a princess, he'd surely terrorize the entire high society with that razor-sharp tongue of his. She quietly laughed at her own absurd thought, not realizing Thierry was silently watching every flicker of her expression. Just then, a servant brought out a special salad plate, prepared specifically for her. But the moment she saw the cucumber slices piled on top, Alicia froze completely. Even in this life, she still couldn't stand the taste of cucumber. Alicia discreetly used her fork to push each slice of cucumber to the edge of the plate. She thought she'd been perfectly subtle, but when she looked up, Thierry's crimson eyes were already fixed intently on her hands. "You hate cucumbers?" he asked coldly. Alicia startled, stammering out an excuse that it wasn't exactly hatred, just that her body reacted a little too sensitively to them. Thierry's gaze suddenly turned sharp and oppressive.
He immediately ordered the steward to summon the sous chef who had prepared the salad up to the dining hall.
His decisiveness left Alicia stunned. All this over a dislike of cucumbers? She told herself firmly that this tyrant definitely had no good intentions. He was scheming something behind this. Click. The dining room door opened. A young woman in a chef's uniform stepped inside, bowing respectfully to the emperor. The moment Alicia saw the sous chef's face clearly, she was utterly stunned. It was Maid, her one and only close friend from her past life. Though her appearance had changed slightly, Alicia recognized her instantly, the friend who used to sneak her bread all those years ago. Alicia's heart swelled with emotion and warmth at seeing her old friend alive and well, now working as a sous chef in the imperial kitchen. Just as Alicia was lost in her emotions, Thierry's warm, low voice suddenly sounded beside her. "Princess," he asked, "do you believe in coincidence?" "To me," he said, "coincidence has always been something arranged by someone else. But now, I'm starting to believe that true, random coincidence does exist in this world after all." He fixed his deep gaze on her and calmly announced a decision that nearly made her choke. "From now on," he said, "you will dine with me every single night." Alicia panicked and tried to decline, worried it would burden his busy schedule. But Thierry instantly crushed that idea by ordering the steward to move her room to the same floor as his. Not only forced to dine together every night, but now her room had to be moved right next to his, too. Alicia was thrown into complete confusion by the tyrant's sudden change in behavior. What on earth was he plotting? Back in her room, Alicia couldn't stop wondering about Thierry's true intentions. Noticing the maid Mary still quietly standing guard beside her, she gently told Mary she could go rest. But Mary hesitated, visibly anxious, before suddenly stepping forward and pleading. "Princess, forgive my forwardness. But I have something extremely important I must confess to you. It concerns the Emperor's childhood." Thierry's childhood? Though she knew gossiping about the Emperor's past was an unforgivable crime, for Alicia's safety, Mary decided to take the risk and reveal everything. Watching the small maid's hands trembling uncontrollably, Alicia sighed gently, reassured her softly, and invited her to sit. She promised to keep this conversation strictly between the two of them. Mary took a deep breath and began telling her about a maid who had once been constantly at Thierry's side in his childhood. The two of them had spent their lonely years together at an isolated villa, but Mary revealed that their bond had suddenly fractured after some mysterious incident. Alicia listened silently on the outside, but inside her mind churned with turmoil. Fractured? But she had clearly been killed that very night. So what exactly had happened afterward? Mary continued, after Thierry awakened his flame power and seized supreme authority. The nobles scrambled to win his favor. Once they learned the tyrant's only weakness was his vanished maid, in their desperation, they hatched a mad scheme. They found someone who looked exactly like Rari and brought her into the palace to seduce him. But no matter how closely the impostor resembled her in looks, she could never imitate the real Rari's spirit and habits. In the end, the plot was exposed, and Thierry ruthlessly purged and executed every family involved in the scheme. A half-baked plan like that, Alicia thought to herself, was doomed to fail from the very start. After that tragedy, rumors began to spread about the falling out between the emperor and his childhood maid, serving as a harsh warning that crushed any lingering ambitions among the nobility. At this point, Mary anxiously clasped her hands, looking at Alicia with pleading eyes. She feared Alicia might one day face the emperor's fury, just like those unfortunate nobles had. Alicia tried to stay calm and asked Mary if she was simply overthinking things. "Not at all, my lady," Mary insisted firmly. No one until now had ever managed to tame the wolf Rue except the emperor himself. "And yet, you," she said, "are not only close to him, you even call him by name directly. That is extremely dangerous." Even those who merely mentioned the wolf's name out of malicious curiosity had been hanged for it. Mary murmured a theory that left Alicia frozen in place. If the rumors were true, and the emperor still hadn't executed her, then perhaps she truly was his one and only exception. Mary's words kept echoing, ringing over and over in Alicia's mind. An exception? Could it be that Thierry truly saw her differently from everyone else? The next morning, a light drizzle blanketed the entire palace. To help ease Alicia's tension, Mary suggested taking her to the royal library, home to tens of thousands of ancient books. Alicia agreed at once. She hoped that within that vast trove of knowledge, she might find some clue to unravel the mystery of her second reincarnation. as well as the origin of the Podia royal family's mysterious flame power. Stepping into the magnificent library, Alicia couldn't help but marvel at its sheer scale. As she was engrossed in searching through history books, a warm, low voice suddenly spoke up from behind her. "Forgive me, I didn't mean to startle you." Alicia jumped and spun around. A handsome young man with soft pink hair and elegant royal attire stood there, bowing with an apologetic smile. "I'm Ethan Riyad," he said. "It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, Princess." Alicia froze, studying the stranger intently. Ethan Riyad, why did that name sound so oddly familiar? A vague sense of familiarity stirred within her, but no matter how hard she searched her memory, she couldn't recall where she'd heard the name before. Composing herself, she lifted the hem of her dress and bowed with formal grace. "I am Princess Alicia of the Kingdom of Astat." Ethan's somewhat excessive courtesy made the air between them turn awkward. Sensing the stiffness, Alicia took the initiative and suggested they address each other more casually. And so, he became simply Ethan, and she became simply Alicia. Noticing the history book in her hands, Ethan asked kindly and offered his help. But then, his face suddenly flushed red as he sheepishly admitted this was the first time he had ever approached someone so directly. The young man's sincere, slightly awkward charm left Alicia feeling strangely warm inside. Worried the princess must be tired after her long journey, Ethan hurried to take his leave, not forgetting to arrange another meeting before he went. Watching his figure disappear among the bookshelves, Alicia thought to herself, "Ethan Riyad, there is definitely something special about this man." Afterward, Alicia buried herself in the historical records of the Podia Empire. Turning page after page of the old books, she gradually uncovered a tale that felt straight out of myth. In ancient times, amid the smoke and fire of endless conquest, an immortal being wielding the power of flame had fallen in love with a mortal, fearing for the safety of the one they loved in a world overflowing with danger. That being had used its unmatched power to unify the nations and forge the mighty Podia Empire. But history always concealed murky, uncertain corners. Alicia furrowed her brow in thought. Why would an immortal god pass away before a mere mortal? And why was it only the royal bloodline that could inherit that flame? Alicia's musings were shattered entirely by a cold command over dinner. Emperor Thierry set down his fork and announced with total authority that a hunting tournament would be held in a week, and she would take part. Alicia was stunned. Her body had only just recovered from her long coma. Riding and archery at this point were far beyond her strength. When she hesitantly explained that noble ladies usually just sat in the stands to cheer, Thierry smirked mockingly. "Who says women can't take part in a hunt?" "What a narrow-minded way of thinking," he added, throwing in an even more provocative remark, that no one expected her to actually catch anything. Just not getting eaten by a wild animal would already count as lucky. Knowing there was no way to sway the Emperor's decision, Alicia resolved to ask a knight to teach her how to ride. But Thierry cut her off instantly, his tone brooking no argument. "No need," he said, "I'll teach you myself." Watching his sly half-smile, Alicia wept inwardly. If she'd known he'd be the one teaching her, she'd have rather bitten her tongue and refused outright. The next day, while getting ready for her lesson, Alicia took the chance to ask Mary about the rules of the tournament. Mary happily explained that whoever hunted the most game before sunset would be declared the winner, with a prize of countless gold and jewels. However, tradition held that the winner would usually gift the prize to their betrothed as a token of their pledge. Mary also revealed that because of the war, this year's coming-of-age ceremonies had all been postponed, turning the hunting tournament into a gathering place for the Empire's young nobility instead. Hearing this, Alicia thought quietly to herself that, having spent 7 years trapped in a deep coma, she herself had never actually had a real coming-of-age ceremony. Dressed neatly in riding attire, Alicia stepped out into the hall and ran into Deputy Commander Oscar. He curiously asked how her riding lesson with the Emperor was going to go that day. As she walked, Alicia mused to herself. The female lead of this novel would surely appear at this year's hunting tournament too. She quietly wondered how things would unfold once Thierry and the woman officially crossed paths. But her train of thought was suddenly cut off. From down the hall, Thierry approached in a stunning royal riding uniform, radiating an overwhelming regal presence. Alicia hurriedly bowed her head in proper etiquette. "It's an honor to see you, Your Majesty." But in response to her polite formality, Thierry merely gave her a cold glance and walked calmly past, as though she were a total stranger. Watching his lonely, distant figure fade into the distance, Alicia felt a dull ache spread through her chest. She reminded herself that she already knew full well he was no longer the sweet boy Thierry from years past. But why then did her heart still sting like this? If he wanted to ignore her so badly, why had he even offered to personally teach her to ride? Unbidden, a memory surfaced, of holding hands and walking side by side with the timid young boy Thierry. Had the kind, gentle Thierry of the past truly vanished without a trace? At the stables, Alicia froze completely at the sight of an enormous, towering black stallion, radiating raw power and ferocity. The horse was simply massive compared to her. Deputy Commander Oscar quickly chimed in, explaining this was the Emperor's own warhorse. Nameless, so everyone had taken to calling it Black Beauty. But Oscar's chattiness quickly caught Thierry's attention. "Oscar," he said, "instead of running your mouth, why don't you run a few laps around the yard until we get back?" Under the Emperor's icy, murderous glare, Oscar could only tremble, accept the order, and rush off. Alicia silently pitied the poor deputy commander for talking himself into trouble yet again. Thierry calmly ordered her to climb onto the massive black horse. Eyeing its towering height, she asked warily if he was joking. Met only with a judgmental sideways glance from him, Alicia had no choice but to helplessly step forward and attempt to climb up herself. But before she could even fumble her way up, a pair of firm hands suddenly wrapped around her waist, and with a swift motion, Thierry effortlessly lifted her onto the saddle as though she weighed nothing at all. His frightening strength left her utterly astonished. Before she could even collect herself, Thierry had already leapt up to sit right behind her. The sudden closeness sent her heart racing wildly. He instructed her in a low voice to sit side saddle for the proper posture, then urged her to hold onto him tightly to keep from falling. The clip-clop of hooves began to echo through the lush green forest. Alicia suddenly recalled an old promise back when the two of them used to dream of riding together to distant, unknown lands. Amid the tranquil forest air, Thierry suddenly lowered his voice and made an unexpected offer. "Princess, if I could grant you one wish, what would you wish for? Feel free to speak freely." Alicia hesitated, wondering if this was some kind of test. After a moment of thought, she said quietly that if given the choice, she only wished to be able to send letters to her family. Thierry paused, puzzled. "That's all?" Seeing his less than pleased expression, Alicia quickly explained she only wanted to let her father and brothers know she was safe. She understood how worried they must have been, sending their youngest daughter, who had only just woken from a 7-year coma, off to a foreign land as a hostage. Even though her time with them had been brief, she still cherished that warmth deeply. Her words finally softened Thierry's heart. He agreed to let her send letters a few times a month, but on one condition: she had to win the upcoming hunting tournament. Win? Alicia asked, flustered. Was he joking with her? But faced with the sheer resolve in Thierry's eyes, she had no choice but to grip the reins tightly and accept this difficult challenge. Her sudden stubbornness and determination made Thierry's lips curl with interest. He leaned in close and teased that she couldn't possibly win without even knowing the basics of riding, and that he would personally teach her. The tyrant's sudden gentleness, combined with Mary's earlier words about her being his exception, sent Alicia's thoughts spinning wildly. Behind the glamorous facade of the Podia Palace, a dark conspiracy was quietly taking shape. In a hidden corner, Sarira was interrogating Mary about Princess Alicia's recent movements. Upon hearing Mary report that Alicia showed no intention of getting closer to the Emperor, the woman flew into a rage and grabbed a fistful of Mary's hair. "Then you need to fan the flames harder, don't you? I told you to lure that naive little wretch into trouble so she'd fall out of favor." Mary tried her best to explain, but was immediately met with a stinging slap. Just then, the noblewoman Ante cut in, not to save Mary, but to deliver an even more sinister order. Lure Alicia into the forest maze during tomorrow's hunting tournament. That night, the sound of a whip cracking echoed through the punishment chamber, accompanied by Mary's desperate, agonized pleas. The noble's cruelty had driven the young maid to the very brink, and the next day, the hunting tournament officially began. In her tent, Mary quietly helped Alicia into her riding boots. Noticing Mary's pale face and uneven limp, Alicia asked gently what was wrong. Mary flinched and quickly lied, claiming she'd simply tripped by accident. Alicia grew suspicious. Mary had been acting strangely lately, not just timid, but visibly terrified. A fierce war raged inside Mary's heart. She was consumed with guilt at having to betray the only person who had ever truly been kind to her. But if she disobeyed, Sarira's horrifying punishment would come crashing down on her again. Trembling, Mary clutched at the hem of her dress. and hesitantly suggested, "Princess, have you ever heard of the forest maze?" "There's a beautiful old abandoned villa there," she said, "with winding paths that make it a peaceful place to rest." Hearing Mary suggest she go explore it, Alicia smiled cheerfully on the surface, but inside, she had already seen right through the whole thing. That villa was exactly the place where she and Thierry had once lived as children. Watching Mary's hands tremble like autumn leaves, she knew with certainty the poor maid was being coerced. Their conversation was cut short by Oscar's arrival. He announced the emperor was on his way and urged her to hurry outside to join the other nobles. As Alicia walked out, whispers and pointed stares from the surrounding nobles immediately converged on her. The scrutinizing looks aimed at a foreign hostage made it hard to breathe. And then the herald's horn sounded loud and resonant. Thierry emerged and took his seat upon the grand throne, radiating an icy, regal air that commanded the entire kingdom. He coldly declared the tournament open, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Alicia startled slightly, feeling as though his crimson eyes had swept briefly over her. But he immediately turned away toward something else. Not even a single glance was he willing to spare. What a cruel, arrogant man. Still muttering curses at Thierry under her breath, Alicia was suddenly bumped into by someone. She stumbled back and found herself facing a strikingly beautiful young woman, apologizing with a flustered bow. Looking at the girl's soft, wavy pink hair and stunning eyes, Alicia's heart skipped in astonishment as she heard someone call out from a distance, "Lady Ariadne, over here!" Ariadne, wasn't that name the exact name of this novel's female lead? The one destined, according to the plot, to become the woman most cherished by Emperor Thierry? Watching Ariadne from afar, Alicia couldn't help but be taken aback. But what shocked her even more was the surname Riyadh. That hair, that presence, it all matched Ethan perfectly. The gracious man she had met at the library the day before. So he really was Count Riyadh, the female lead's own brother. The revelation left Alicia thoroughly unsettled by how tangled these threads of fate were becoming right before her eyes. While still lost in her calculations, a familiar low, cold voice suddenly spoke up right behind her, startling Alicia. "Why do you look so distracted?" Thierry had been standing behind her without her noticing. Seeing her subtle attempt to avoid him, he stepped forward at once, blocking her retreat with a strong arm and coldly demanded an answer. "You're going hunting without a weapon?" Alicia stammered an excuse, saying she was simply willing to leave it up to luck. Thierry drew out a small, elegantly crafted sword and placed it in her hand. "This is a light blade," he said, "perfectly suited for a lady like you. Be careful not to stab yourself." Just then, the horn signaling the start of the hunt echoed thunderously across the mountains and forest. Before turning to leave, Thierry couldn't help but glance back one more time with a warning. "Princess, if you run into trouble, return to the palace immediately. Don't let yourself get hurt and become a burden." Watching his commanding figure walk away, Alicia found herself silently wondering. During those silent dinners before, he had always been quietly watching her. Was he genuinely worried about her, or simply keeping her under constant guard? As she prepared to mount her horse and set off, Alicia suddenly heard a desperate cry from behind. The maid was struggling to run toward her, one leg limping badly, her face full of panic. Mary clung tightly to Alicia's arm, her voice trembling through tears, begging her, "Please, whatever happens, do not go into the forest maze. The villa there is about to collapse," she said, "and deep in the mountains there are countless dangerous wild beasts. I accept whatever punishment awaits me for this insolence. But please, I beg you, stay far away from that place." To ease the maid's overwhelming fear, Alicia gently agreed, though her mind remained sharply alert. A fragile maid like her would never dare act out on her own like this. Someone was clearly pulling the strings behind the scenes. Still, Mary's honesty at the last moment moved Alicia deeply. When Oscar curiously asked what was going on, Alicia simply brushed it off and urged him to move along. Inside, she reassured herself. At least now she knew for certain someone was out to harm her. The royal procession rode grandly into the tournament grounds amid the crowd's murmurs of admiration. Alicia held her head high atop her proud white mare. But her appearance instantly caught the eye of Andrea, an arrogant noble and eldest son of Duke Capio. He rode his horse up close, pretending to greet Oscar, only to be coldly ignored by the deputy commander. Undeterred, Andrea shifted his target to Alicia. "So," he sneered after probing her identity, "this is Princess Alicia of Astat, the one recently taken hostage by the Emperor? His Majesty must be remarkably generous indeed, letting a prisoner attend such a prestigious event." His mocking, contemptuous tone made Alicia seethe with quiet fury, but she kept a cold, polite smile fixed on her face. Seeing the princess insulted, Oscar showed no restraint at all. He immediately shot Andrea a sharp glare along with a razor-edged remark. "That's right. If His Majesty weren't so generous," he said, "how would a nuisance like you have any standing to even appear here at all?" Oscar's words landed like a bucket of cold water thrown straight in the arrogant noble's face. Furious, Andrea shouted at Oscar, warning him not to think he could do whatever he pleased just because he had the Emperor's favor. But Oscar merely sneered, calling out his cowardly arrogance, always hiding behind the shadow of his family's name. Enraged, Andrea drew his sword to strike. Clang! The sharp clash of steel rang out, harsh and jarring. Oscar reacted in a flash, drawing his own sword to block the attack right there on horseback, both men glaring at each other with murderous intensity. Just as the brawl was about to erupt, a low, ice-cold voice suddenly cut in from behind. "What's all this commotion about?" From a distance, Thierry approached with imposing grandeur, riding his massive black stallion, surrounded by an escort of royal knights. "You're all wasting your time on pointless bickering," he said, instead of focusing on the hunt. Alicia let out a relieved sigh, glad the trouble had been stopped just in time. Yet she couldn't help but wonder, why had he shown up at such a perfectly convenient moment? Could he have been secretly watching her from a distance? Before she could think any further, from deep within the bushes, a hidden assassin had already drawn his bow, aimed directly at her. "Princess, get down now!" Thierry's desperate shout came far too late, as an arrow sliced through the wind, burying itself in her white mare. The horse shrieked in agony, bolting in a wild panic deeper into the forest. Losing her balance, Alicia could only cling to the horse's back, screaming helplessly for help. Watching Alicia being swept away, Thierry lost every trace of his usual composure. He gritted his teeth and ordered Oscar to gather the guards and pursue, while he himself spurred his horse into a frenzied chase after the panicked mare. He was consumed with regret for ever letting her join the tournament. The distance between them was too great, and Thierry screamed her name in desperation. "Princess!" But in that very instant, a hazy silhouette flickered before his eyes. His heart clenched and a familiar name slipped from his lips without thinking, Rari. Even knowing how insane the thought was, reason had already been completely overwhelmed by emotion. He could not lose her a second time. Following the trail of blood, Thierry found her white mare lying dead in a pool of blood, apparently attacked by some brutal wild beast, but there was no sign of Alicia anywhere. Rustle, rustle, a growl rumbled out from the darkness. A massive, scarred gray wolf lunged straight at him with savage force. Thierry drew his sword in a flash, a single razor-sharp strike tearing through the night, cutting the beast down in an instant. Panting beside the beast's corpse, his face streaked with blood, Thierry frantically wondered if the creature had already devoured her. But he quickly realized there was no trace of her anywhere nearby. She must have escaped. She had to be safe. As he kept searching, his eyes suddenly landed on a massive old tree with a hollow cleverly hidden behind climbing vines, and sweet childhood memories came flooding back. Back then, Rari had once shown him some peaches she'd picked, and together they had chosen this very hollow as their own private hideout. This place known only to the two of them, hope kindling in his chest, Thierry rushed toward the hollow and pulled the vines aside without hesitation, stepping inside. He gritted his teeth and called out loudly, "Alicia! Whoever you truly are now," he told himself. Whatever identity you carry, it doesn't matter to him at all. All he needed was for her to be safe. When he found her, Thierry pulled Alicia tightly into his arms. His heart pounded fiercely against her hand, and Alicia, utterly bewildered, wondered why he was so worried about her. A sharp pain in her leg made her whimper softly. It turned out she had twisted her ankle badly during the fall. Without a word of warning, Thierry gently scooped her up in a princess carry, his movements swift and decisive. Embarrassed, Alicia insisted she could still walk on her own. But Thierry only coldly reassured her with a rare joke. "If you're worried I don't have the strength to carry you, don't be. You're much lighter than you look." And as she looked into his worried crimson eyes, asking if she had a fever or was hurt anywhere else, Alicia was left quietly flustered. The determined look in his eyes, paired with this strange tenderness from the tyrant, only left her more confused than ever. He even promised to compensate her and grant her every wish after such a disastrous hunt. After returning to the palace, the royal physician bandaged her wounds and instructed Alicia to rest quietly. In his room, Thierry sat lost in thought. The uncanny similarities, the strange habits shared between Alicia and the maid Rari from his past, kept surfacing in his mind over and over. He clenched his fist and murmured to himself, "Until now, I've kept telling myself it was all just coincidence. But there are far too many coincidences for this to be normal. There's only one explanation left. Rari and Alicia are, in fact, the very same person." Sweet yet painful memories of Rari surfaced vividly in Thierry's mind once more. Rari had once stepped into his lonely life like a brilliant ray of spring sunlight, chasing away every dark cloud that hung over him. She was unlike anyone else. Even though the other servants had bullied and beaten her cruelly for the crime of serving a shunned prince, she had always smiled and lied to keep him from worrying. He remembered clearly her face, covered in bruises, and her limping legs from back then, when he told her she should just leave, that he could take care of himself. But Rari had only smiled warmly. "No, I could never do that," she said. "You might manage fine on your own, but if I weren't here, I would cry myself to sleep every night, missing you terribly. I will always stay by your side." Her gentle words and warm smile had become the only thing that kept him clinging to this cursed life of his. But that fateful night stole everything away. Young Thierry woke in a panic, only to find Rari's room empty, her bed left in disarray. She was gone. He wept in choked sobs, believing she had broken her promise and abandoned him. Click. A shadow leapt in through the window. It was a fairy with silver hair and pointed ears. He had been tracking a trail in search of his own kind, but instead caught the thick scent of fresh blood and death, and stumbled upon this pitiful boy. "You, what did you do to Rari?" Young Thierry roared in fury. Magical flames suddenly erupted violently all around him. The fairy was stunned by the boy's undeniable royal bloodline. Sensing a golden opportunity, he decided to strike a deal with the child. But the instant the words left his mouth, a terrifying roar tore through the air. Wild, raging flames burst forth, engulfing young Thierry's entire body. His eyes blazed a brilliant crimson, radiating a killing intent that reached the sky. "I won't ask again. Where is Rari?" Watching young Thierry's raging inferno, the silver-haired fairy was utterly stunned to witness him awaken his power far ahead of schedule. Though nearly burned alive himself, the fairy still shouted out a desperate but clever warning to douse Thierry's rage. "Put out the fire now, or we'll both die. And if that happens, Rari's soul will be lost forever." Hearing the word soul, Thierry froze, his fury cooling at once, and demanded the fairy explain himself clearly. The fairy introduced himself as Vakun, a half-fairy searching for the whereabouts of his own kind. Vakun revealed that Rari's body had been destroyed by some kind of spell, but her soul still existed, drifting aimlessly with nowhere to go. To save Rari and find power great enough to protect her, Thierry swore that the very first thing he would do was seize the throne of Podia. And so, the alliance between the future tyrant and the brilliant advisor began that very fateful night. Back in the present, Alicia woke from a long, healing sleep induced by magic, and while she was still half-dazed, a warm, low voice sounded beside her ear. Thierry was sitting right beside her bed, calmly reading a book, having watched over her sleep since the day before. Alicia flushed red with embarrassment, silently praying she hadn't snored in front of him. Thierry set his book down and asked gently how she was feeling. Alicia quickly waved a hand, insisting she was fine. But his next words left her completely frozen. "Though your wound wasn't fatal," he said, "you came very close to death. Still, I'm glad you're safe. Rari? Had he really just called her Rari? Or was she simply too dazed and had misheard?" Before Alicia could question it, Thierry quickly shifted the topic to the incident in the forest. Alicia recounted the terrifying moment when the white horse had gone mad from the arrow wound, how hard she'd struggled not to fall off, and how she had hidden inside the tree hollow, sensing a terrifyingly dark aura closing in around her. Bringing up the assassination attempt, Alicia suddenly remembered an important clue. "That's right," she said. "Before I passed out, I managed to keep hold of the arrowhead." Before she could even finish speaking, Thierry had already pulled out a handkerchief wrapped around the blood-stained arrowhead and set it before her. It turned out that while the servants had been changing her clothes, he had personally retrieved and examined it himself. The tip of the arrowhead had changed color, a clear sign it had been poisoned. Thierry stood and offered his praise. "I'm genuinely impressed," he said, "that you managed to stay calm enough to gather evidence in such a dire situation. Leave the rest to me now. Go rest, princess." Those two cold words, princess, pulled Alicia sharply back to reality. Yet the memory of his tight, fearful embrace when he'd rescued her in the forest kept resurfacing in her mind. That warm, urgent embrace had felt as though he'd just recovered a priceless treasure he thought he'd lost forever. Lying back down in bed, Alicia's mind was in complete turmoil, and what worried her most of all was how closely this ambush mirrored the original storyline. In the novel One Wish, the female lead Ariadne had also been targeted with an arrow poisoned with pochi flower venom, a toxin that enhanced physical strength but was extremely dangerous. Alicia had picked it up on impulse as a precaution, but now, with events meant for the female lead happening to her instead, Alicia realized she had landed squarely in the crosshairs of someone extremely dangerous, lurking in the shadows. Duke Rupert, a cunning and powerful noble. He had secretly brewed a physical stimulant from the pochi plant to quietly eliminate anyone standing in the way of his daughter's rise to the throne as empress. But his plan had begun to unravel the moment the poisoned arrowhead was discovered, and Alicia worried silently that as a fragile hostage, she would make an easy target. Amid her whirling thoughts, Mary entered the room, and Alicia poured a cup of warm tea, inviting Mary to sit and speak with her honestly. Trembling, Mary confessed the entire truth. She admitted it was the head steward and Sarira's superior who had forced her to harm Alicia in order to get her cast out of favor. Alicia looked at Mary with sympathy, understanding all too well how a lowly maid could never dare defy the steward's orders. Moved by her courage in confessing, Alicia decided to give her a second chance. "Mary," she said, "I need you to help me with something. Quietly let it slip to Sarira that I still have the poisoned arrowhead recovered from the horse." A perfect trap had been set. Now all Alicia had to do was wait and see if the prey would take the bait. But having Mary act as a double agent left her unable to shake off a nagging worry. All this turmoil, she thought, traced back to the tangled bond of fate between her and Thierry. Click. The bedroom door swung open, cutting through her thoughts. Thierry stepped inside, casually asking after her health. The tyrant's sudden concern left Alicia flustered as she awkwardly bowed in greeting. Thierry moved closer, standing in silence, hesitating for a long moment. Thump, thump. Alicia's heart raced wildly at his strange shift in behavior ever since the hunting trip. Thierry suddenly pulled her into a tight embrace, his warm voice murmuring softly, "I missed you. I truly missed you so much, Rari." Alicia went completely still. Had he just called her Rari? Her mind spun with endless questions. How did he know, and since when had he known? Forcing herself to stay calm to avoid falling into a trap, she stammered, feigning confusion, asking who Rari even was. Rari? But Thierry only stared deep into her eyes, lips curling as he exposed her lie. "Look at your own reaction," he said. "You clearly know exactly who Rari is." Seeing the oppressive intensity in his crimson eyes, Alicia panicked inwardly, terrified he still harbored resentment, believing she had betrayed him all those years ago. "It seems that sleeping through the past 7 years has cost me a great deal of news, but I haven't forgotten." "Very well," he said briefly. "I'll see you at dinner." Thierry turned and walked away without another word, leaving Alicia still unable to gather herself. Once the door had closed and he was out in the hallway, Thierry let out a helpless sigh. "Ugh," he thought. "I never meant to put her on guard like this, especially now that I've finally, after so much struggle, been reunited with her." In the head steward's private chambers, Sarira knelt with her head bowed, awaiting the woman's fury for having recklessly used poison from the pochi plant to spook Alicia's horse. Chloe snapped furiously, calling her a fool, warning that if this went south, it wouldn't just be the two of them, but the entire Duke Rupert family behind them who would be dragged down too. No matter the cost, they had to seize back the poisoned arrowhead from Alicia before Thierry discovered the truth. Stepping out into the hallway, Sarira ground her teeth in jealousy, resentment, and contempt boiling inside her. She believed Alicia was nothing but a useless princess, fortunate enough to have some looks to seduce the emperor with, and nothing more. To protect her family's interests, she resolved to personally eliminate this thorn in her side before things spiraled any further out of control. Meanwhile, back at the Imperial Palace, Thierry was relentlessly investigating the origin of the poisoned arrowhead. Facing his advisor, Thierry suddenly brought up an old matter. That strange surge of magic had appeared from the direction of the kingdom of Astat, right as Princess Alicia woke from her coma. His gaze lowered, filled with quiet resolve. "I have good reason to believe," he said, "that phenomenon is connected to Rari." Thierry's suspicion wasn't unfounded. While anyone could imitate Rari's odd habits, like her explanation of eye color, or her allergy to cucumbers, or her fondness for playing with black wolves. The fact that Alicia knew secrets shared only between the two of them was absolutely no coincidence. Sensing Thierry's intention to confront her directly, the advisor hurried to stop him. He reminded the Emperor to consider things from the princess's perspective, to avoid frightening her. More importantly, Rari's soul had been scattered by the fairy clan after her death. It was entirely possible that a fragment of that soul had found refuge inside Princess Alicia's body. Gazing at the exquisite necklace resting in its wooden box, the only keepsake left behind by his fairy-blooded mother, Thierry's painful memories came rushing back. Born with cursed mixed blood, his entire life had been an unbroken stretch of darkness since the moment he was born, and Rari alone had been the single ray of light that warmed his soul. If the fairy clan ever discovered the princess was truly her, there was no telling what they might do. Thierry was now absolutely certain that Alicia was Rari. The advisor reasoned there were only two possibilities. Either she genuinely had no memory of her past life, or she was deliberately hiding the truth out of fear of his reputation as a tyrant. Hearing his advisor call him frightening, Thierry looked genuinely bewildered, privately thinking he had already been treating her with the utmost gentleness. The mighty emperor suddenly flushed red like a teenager falling in love for the first time, hesitantly asking a wonderfully naive question, "How do I get closer to her then?" The tyrant's adorable awkwardness left even his advisor at a loss for words. He offered some advice. For now, try to get closer to her step by step. Be courteous, spend plenty of time with her, learn her likes, make her laugh, and eventually she'll naturally lower her guard on her own. Hearing this deep in his heart, Thierry silently wondered, "Rari, would you be willing to open your heart to me again, if this time I could be gentler and more patient?" And the advisor, quite pleased with himself, reasoned that if Princess Alicia truly was Rari, she would be the key that led them straight to the fairy clan's stronghold. But whether or not they ever found Rari, he was absolutely determined not to let the fairy clan threaten the empire. And the advisor burst out laughing, gloating that the arrogant, pure-blooded fairies were surely trembling in fear right now before the power of their new emperor. Then, unable to resist, he teased Thierry, suggesting the young emperor come to him for some advice on romance. Thierry coldly drew his sword, growling a threat to send his overly talkative advisor to meet his ancestors. And the advisor turned pale, holding his breath, immediately stammering out an apology and begging for mercy. The next morning at the East Palace, Alicia leisurely sipped her tea. Though she had temporarily dodged Thierry's suspicion, she still feared he would soon uncover the truth. Her appearance had changed so completely, how on earth could he possibly have figured it out? But recalling his tender words from the day before, her heart gave a small ache, and a knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. It wasn't Mary who walked in, but Sarira Walt, the very woman who had killed her horse the day before, now shamelessly introducing herself as her new maid. Alicia probed her about Mary's whereabouts, and received a cold reply that Mary had been punished and imprisoned for neglecting her duties during the hunt. Alicia immediately played the role of an innocent, naive princess, crying with worry and pleading to find a way to save her loyal maid. Seeing this, Sarira thought scornfully to herself, just as expected, nothing more than a weak, gullible hostage. She set her trap, luring her in. Actually, there is one way, if Mary could uncover the true mastermind behind the assassination attempt. That was exactly what Alicia had been waiting for. She perked up with joy. "What luck," she said. "I actually picked up the arrowhead that struck the horse that day." Sarira's eyes lit up, believing the prey had taken the bait, and she eagerly asked to see the arrowhead. But Alicia only tilted her head and smiled sweetly. "I already handed it to the Emperor," she said. "He wanted to personally investigate this matter himself." Her words struck like a bolt from the blue. Sarira's face instantly turned deathly pale, panic overwhelming her at the realization that the fateful arrowhead now rested in the hands of the tyrant Thierry. Noticing her shock, Alicia smiled and asked after her with false saccharine concern. Sarira hastily made an excuse to slip away and destroy the remaining evidence. Watching Sarira's frantic, retreating figure, Alicia's gaze turned sharp and cold. She would surely act tonight without a doubt. Alicia immediately sought out Oscar, and with a smile, proposed a strategy meeting to plan their next move. In the dead of a quiet night, Sarira crept into the storeroom, candle in hand. She hurriedly rifled through drawer after drawer, searching for the last remaining vial of poachy poison. She sighed with relief the moment the vial was finally in her hand. and even hatched a vile idea to hide it in Alicia's room and frame her for the crime. Well, what's that in your hand? A cold voice suddenly sounded right behind her. Ah, Sarira froze on the spot, cold sweat breaking out. Trembling, she turned around and found herself face to face, in horror, with Alicia's piercing blue eyes staring steadily at her under the flickering candlelight. It looks like liquid, but such a strange color, Alicia mused. I'd wager this is poison. In the dark storeroom, Sarira froze completely, faced with Alicia's calm, unshaken smile. Clack, clack. The sound of rushing footsteps echoed as Oscar stepped out of the shadows, sternly ordering Sarira to come with him for questioning about smuggling contraband into the palace. Wait, this is a setup. I only came here for personal reasons. Who dares accuse me falsely? Sarira screamed, fighting back with all her strength. But almost instantly, Mary stepped forward as a witness, exposing how Sarira had secretly been holding a suspicious vial and plotting to seize her position as maid once she learned the princess still had the arrowhead. Cornered with nowhere to turn, Sarira snapped, roaring furiously and pointing straight at Alicia's face, calling her a lowly hostage who dared frame her with such a shameless trap. Sarira's blatant insolence left Mary covering her mouth in shock. But Alicia only smiled coldly, stepping closer to deliver a merciless verdict. If this really is a misunderstanding, she said, then you should have no problem cooperating with the investigation. But if it isn't, your entire family will fall and the guillotine will be waiting for you. The chilling authority in her tone left Sarira utterly speechless. Trembling, she accepted her fate as Oscar dragged her down to the dungeon amid pitiful sobs. News of the arrest reached Thierry's ears the very next morning. Without any warning, he shoved the door open and rushed into her room, his appearance utterly disheveled, his hair a mess from rushing over so fast. He stormed toward her, shouting furiously, "Why would you take matters into your own hands like that? Do you have any idea how dangerous that was?" No. Watching Thierry's furious expression, Alicia wondered quietly whether he was upset that she had acted on her own. But the Emperor's anger quickly melted into worry. "If you had just told me directly," he said, "I could have handled it myself cleanly." "You're still recovering. Don't push yourself so hard." Looking at his slightly disheveled hair, Alicia felt her heart clench. He had rushed here the moment he heard the news. All of it, out of concern for her safety. Alicia looked away, deliberately steering the conversation toward Sarira's crimes. Sarira, Thierry coldly explained that her punishment would depend on the toxicity of the vial, and he suspected this substance was connected to a string of other mysterious cases within the palace. Alicia knew well that if it truly was poachy flower poison, Sarira would certainly face execution. Thierry looked at her gently. "Either way," he said, "your contribution this time cannot be overlooked." The unexpected praise left Alicia flustered, assuming he was exaggerating. But Thierry remained serious. "Do I really look like the type," he asked, "to hand out empty compliments?" His blunt, somewhat overconfident manner left Alicia with nothing to do but laugh it off awkwardly. Meanwhile, inwardly, the proud Tyrant was seething with frustration, scolding himself for not using a gentler tone when praising her. Standing on the sunlit balcony, Thierry suddenly changed the subject, asking a loaded question about her 7-year coma. He asked slowly whether she remembered anything about her life before the accident. The abrupt shift immediately put Alicia on guard. Staring deep into her eyes, Thierry continued probing. "Have you ever felt like the memories in your head don't quite belong to you?" "I don't think so," Alicia answered hesitantly. Each of Thierry's questions felt like an attempt to strip away the biggest secret she was hiding. She trembled, wondering if he had already discovered something. Thierry asked softly, "Have you ever wondered if you might be someone else entirely and not the princess of the kingdom of Astat?" Before she could react, he gently raised a warm hand to touch her hair. "If not," he said, "then why do I keep seeing her? Seeing Rari's reflection in you?" Looking into his crimson eyes, filled with endless longing, Alicia's heart pounded uncontrollably. His gaze was so sincere that she nearly believed he truly missed her to the point of madness. When Alicia hesitantly asked whether she reminded him of a girl named Rari, Thierry admitted that he had, in fact, been searching for Rari all this time. But just as Thierry privately thought of making it up to Rari and finally confessing the feelings he had kept locked away for so long, he accidentally chose a far too cold phrase to describe his intentions, to settle this matter once and for all. Settle it once and for all? Those words landed like a bucket of cold water straight to Alicia's heart.
She suddenly misunderstood, believing Thierry wanted to find Rari only to eliminate her, erasing the last trace of his fragile past.
Her face went pale, and she quickly made an excuse about being tired to send him away. Watching his figure walk off through the glass doors, her heart clenched painfully. So that longing, tender gaze from earlier had just been an act after all, Thierry. Fear clung to Alicia even into her dreams. She woke with a start from a nightmare in which Thierry, holding a plate of cucumbers, interrogated her in a terrifying manner. Before she could even recover, she had to face yet another uninvited guest, right at the crack of dawn. It was Countess Ante, Sarira's aunt, and the true mastermind pulling the strings behind the failed assassination. The Countess feigned remorse, offering to personally look after Alicia to atone for her sins. But how could she possibly fool a sharp mind like Alicia's? Alicia coldly refused, demanding instead that Mary be reinstated as her maid. To send a clear warning to the enemy behind the scenes, Alicia deliberately brought up the blood relation between the Countess and Sarira, while cleverly mocking the woman's supposed loyalty to the royal family. Watching the Countess's face go pale with fear that Sarira might expose her from prison, Alicia felt a quiet sense of triumph, having temporarily gained the upper hand over her enemy, forcing the woman to stay cautious before she dared try anything again. Just as the Countess was about to take her leave, another knock sounded at the door, and Thierry walked in, breaking the tense atmosphere with a sudden invitation. "Have you eaten breakfast yet?" "I've prepared a table in the greenhouse. Come with me." The invitation left Alicia thoroughly bewildered. Wasn't dinner every night already enough? Now breakfast too? She wept inwardly, dreading the cucumber hell that surely awaited her, but ultimately couldn't find any excuse to refuse. Yet the moment she stepped into the greenhouse, Alicia was completely overwhelmed. Under the radiant morning sunlight filtering through the glass roof, an exquisitely arranged table sat surrounded by blooming rose bushes competing to show off their beauty. Thierry courteously pulled out a chair for her, but just as she approached, her heel suddenly slipped on the damp ground. "Oh no, I'm going to fall," she thought in a panic, squeezing her eyes shut and bracing for a painful landing. But instead of the cold ground, she fell straight into a firm, warm embrace. Thierry had caught her in a flash, pulling her tightly into his arms, amid a romantic shower of falling rose petals. His voice was warm, laced with unmistakable indulgence and worry. "Honestly," he said, "I can't take my eyes off you, not even for a second." The warmth of his breath and the solid strength of his chest sent Alicia's heart racing. Flustered with embarrassment, she pushed him away rather roughly. Seeing this, Thierry turned his face away slightly and pleaded sadly, "Don't push me away." In that moment, Alicia felt so flustered she thought she might explode. Her heart pounded relentlessly. Why could this cold, ruthless tyrant possibly be this endearing? Even as she tried desperately to remind herself that Thierry only saw her as a hostage and to keep her distance, she couldn't stop her heart from fluttering at his sweet, attentive gestures. "Relax," Thierry said gently, breaking the silence. Alicia struggled to swallow each small bite under his unwavering gaze. The tension made the lavish meal before her taste as bland as candle wax. In a hidden corner of the greenhouse, Countess Ante watched the two of them silently, her eyes filled with unease. The princess's sharpness had her on edge, especially with her niece Sarira locked away in the dungeon. If Sarira couldn't withstand the pressure and confessed the mastermind's name, her entire family would be buried along with her. Thinking of this, her gaze turned cold. A new, ruthless scheme began taking shape. Back at the table, noticing Alicia's steak had barely been touched, Thierry kept peppering her with questions about her food preferences. From the salad to the sweet desserts. Why was she eating so little? Was she really feeling well? "The royal physician just examined me and confirmed I'm in perfect health," Alicia said with a forced smile, dodging the question. She thought silently to herself that the only reason she couldn't eat was because she had to sit across from him. Thierry must be hiding something, she thought, and yet, my foolish heart still wants to believe he's being genuinely sincere. But what happened next left her frozen in shock. He gripped his fork tightly and coldly declared in a chillingly flat voice, "That physician will be dealt with immediately. I have no use for someone who can't even give an accurate diagnosis." "What?" Alicia was stunned. His icy expression and emotionless tone yanked her sharply back to harsh reality. The man before her was not the fragile boy Thierry from years past, but the supreme emperor of the Podia Empire. And she was nothing more than a hostage, plain and simple. The warmth that had just begun to kindle was instantly snuffed out. Noticing her pale expression, Thierry reached out to check on her. But Alicia flinched away in a panic and hurriedly excused herself, leaving the Emperor standing alone in the magnificent greenhouse. Watching her figure grow distant, Thierry thought painfully to himself, "Why? I only wanted to treat her kindly and understand her. But every time I take a step closer, she takes a step further away. No matter how hard I try to hold on, she slips through my fingers like fine grains of sand." News of the disastrous breakfast quickly spread to the imperial kitchen. The nearly untouched food cart being wheeled back left the kitchen staff utterly stunned. The sous chef, who had prepared the cucumbers by the Emperor's order, quietly speculated about Thierry's one-sided feelings for the princess. The fact that Alicia had refused to eat cucumbers due to an allergy suddenly reminded her of someone she used to know. But her train of thought was cut short by a spiteful insult from the arrogant head chef, mocking her humble background as an orphan. Just as the tension in the kitchen was about to boil over, Mary's sudden arrival diffused the entire dispute. "Sorry to interrupt," she said. "I've come here on Princess Alicia's orders. She has a special message for the sous chef." Earlier, after returning to her room following the disastrous breakfast, Alicia couldn't help blaming herself for reacting so harshly toward Thierry. The flicker of hurt on the Emperor's face kept resurfacing in her mind. But her reason quickly overrode her softening heart, reminding herself she could not afford to let her guard down around such a dangerous tyrant. In her loneliest moment, a knock at the door brought good news. Mary had officially been reinstated as her personal maid. Moved by the princess's mercy and this second chance, Mary broke into tears, swearing absolute loyalty from that day forward. Alicia gently comforted the small maid. Through their conversations, Alicia learned of Mary's pitiful family circumstances. The daughter of a declining noble family, her parents had died young, leaving her with nowhere to turn and making her easy prey for the enemy's ruthless schemes. Alicia thought quietly to herself that Mary was the only person she could truly trust right now. But to deal with the dark forces lurking outside, she needed someone with far greater influence by her side. Just then, a familiar figure from her past life surfaced in Alicia's memory. Maid, her close childhood friend who had always promised to protect her no matter what. Realizing that her old friend was now working as the sous chef, Alicia immediately asked Mary to deliver a special message down to the royal kitchen. In the kitchen, Mary clearly relayed the princess's message in front of the arrogant head chef. The princess wished to extend her heartfelt thanks to the sous chef for the wonderful meal, while also apologizing for leaving food uneaten, as she hadn't been feeling her best today. Alicia's thoughtful message left Maid not only stunned, but also delivered a stinging slap to the arrogant head chef, who always looked down on her for her humble background. With the princess's implicit backing, Maid proudly fired back at the head chef, leaving him choking on his own fury, unable to do a thing about it. After leaving the kitchen, Maid couldn't help but reflect on the poor princess. Despite her royal title, Alicia was, in truth, nothing more than a lonely hostage within these palace walls. Maid privately resolved to treat her with more kindness the next time they met. Back in her room, Mary excitedly recounted Maud's spectacular comeback to Alicia. Hearing Mary praise her old friend's strong, unyielding character, Alicia smiled softly. Maid had always been a fighter, through and through. Just then, Mary relayed an unexpected message from the Emperor's advisor. Thierry had urgent business and would be unable to join her for dinner tonight. Though she outwardly cheered at the thought of some quiet time to read, deep down, a vague sense of disappointment welled up in Alicia's heart. Wasn't he the one who had insisted they dine together every single night? Was it because of how she had pushed him away that morning? As night fell, blanketing the palace in darkness, at Duke Rupert's estate, the atmosphere grew suffocatingly tense. Upon learning the poisoned arrowhead had fallen into the Emperor's hands, the Duke slammed his fist furiously onto the table. He roared at Countess Ante over her niece Sarira's stupidity. "Do you have any idea what you've done? If the Emperor discovers it's poachy flower poison, all of us will be finished." Facing the Duke's blazing fury, Countess Ante bowed her head, trembling, and apologized. A sharp, cold glint suddenly flickered in her eyes. "Please, give me one more chance. I'll settle this matter myself, once and for all." She clutched the small vial of poison tightly in her hand. "I assure you," she said firmly, "I've already bribed a prison guard." "Rest assured," she added, "I'll make sure that girl Sarira stays silent forever." In stark contrast to the grim atmosphere at Duke Rupert's estate, Alicia's chambers had never looked more radiant and magnificent. "Madame Valentina, The Empire's most renowned fashion designer had personally arrived with a sea of dazzling gowns, all by the Emperor's command. Alicia couldn't help but feel dizzy at such extravagance, especially upon learning that Thierry had ordered not just formal gowns for the coming-of-age ceremony, but her everyday wardrobe as well. Her confusion was cleared up when an excited Valentina recounted her meeting with the Tyrant Emperor. "His Majesty told me," she said, "that the princess is exactly the muse I've always been searching for, and he's given me full permission to create the most magnificent gowns imaginable, with no budget limit whatsoever." The revelation that Thierry had spared no expense for her sake left Alicia stunned and blushing. Though she tried to explain it was all just a misunderstanding, the sly designer only winked knowingly, teasing that she'd keep this little secret safe. The fitting session dragged on for hours, leaving Alicia utterly exhausted. Escaping the whirlwind of gown fittings, Alicia decided to head down to the dining hall for dinner instead of hiding away in her room. A full week had passed since that awkward breakfast in the greenhouse, and Thierry had vanished completely, as though deliberately avoiding her. His sudden disappearance left an indescribable ache of emptiness in her heart. When the escorting knight Oscar revealed that Thierry had suffered from chronic insomnia ever since taking the throne, and that it had only worsened lately, Alicia's heart clenched softly. Just as they reached the staircase, Thierry's figure suddenly emerged from the shadows, his eyes weary and troubled, turned toward them. Noticing the princess's hesitant steps, Oscar kindly extended his hand, offering to help her down since her leg was still healing from the accident. But Oscar's simple gesture of concern accidentally ignited a raging fire of jealousy in Thierry. The menacing aura radiating from the tyrant made even the advisor standing behind him tremble, silently praying for the poor knight's fate. Before Oscar could even touch the princess's hand, Thierry abruptly stepped in front, cutting off all contact between them. His familiar, warm, low voice sounded beside her, laced with restless worry. "Is your leg still hurting? May I offer you a hand?" Looking into his crimson eyes fixed on hers, Alicia's heart pounded so hard it felt ready to leap out of her chest. She realized with sudden clarity that she truly had missed him terribly this past week. Seeing Alicia hesitate, a flicker of hurt crossed Thierry's eyes, and he lowered his voice, quietly blaming himself, assuming she meant to refuse his help once again. Seeing the rare, vulnerable look on the proud emperor's face, Alicia quickly cut in. "No," she said. "My leg still hurts quite a bit. Would your majesty be kind enough to lend me a hand?" Her sweet reply left Thierry stunned, his face flushing red with happiness. Witnessing this tender moment between the emperor and the princess, everyone nearby could only hold their breath in amazement. The knight Oscar, still oblivious, tried to fulfill his escort duties anyway, only to be immediately met with a jealous glare from Thierry that practically shot sparks. The menacing aura radiating from the tyrant forced the advisor to hastily drag Oscar away to avoid disaster. "If you're really that eager to meet your ancestors, be my guest." The advisor's chillingly whispered warning left Oscar pale as a ghost, and he obediently retreated along with Mary, leaving the two of them alone. Walking beside Thierry, Alicia's mind was in complete turmoil. She scolded herself for how easily she melted at his pitiful puppy dog eyes, the kind of gaze that could drown even the fiercest wolf. Studying Thierry's profile carefully under the lantern light, she couldn't help but ache at the sight of the dark, exhausted circles under his eyes. Oscar's words about his chronic insomnia kept lingering in her mind. When Thierry heard Alicia offer her sincere thanks for the beautiful gown, a rare warm smile spread across his lips, sending her heart racing wildly once more. Just as she was about to step into the dining hall, he gently caught her hand, holding her back, his face flushed with a hint of bashfulness. "Princess," he said, "would you do me the honor of being my companion at the upcoming social gathering?" Alicia was taken aback. A supreme emperor humbling himself to seek the consent of a mere hostage like her? But before she could give her answer, a guard came rushing in, breathless, to report urgent news from the dungeon. Thierry's gaze hardened, and he reluctantly took his leave. "I have urgent business to attend to. Enjoy your meal." Meanwhile, deep in the dark, cold depths of the royal dungeon, a mysterious figure wrapped in a cloak moved slowly past the rows of cells. The figure stopped in front of Sarira's cell. It was Countess Ante. Seeing her aunt had come to save her, Sarira clung to the bars in relief, trembling as she swore she hadn't breathed a single word about her or anyone else involved. To soothe her weeping, pleading niece, the Countess gently handed her a loaf of bread. My poor girl. Just hold on a little longer. That person has promised to find a way to get you out. I've brought you a little something to eat. Starving after days without food, Sarira eagerly grabbed the bread and devoured it. But the moment she swallowed, her eyes suddenly widened in agony. The poison struck with brutal force and Sarira collapsed, fresh blood pouring endlessly from the corner of her mouth. As she stared in despair at her own aunt, recognizing the cruelest betrayal of all, the Countess turned and walked away coldly, without a shred of remorse. Forgive me, but I cannot let you live any longer. You brought this on yourself, you foolish girl. The Countess's plan for silencing witnesses seemed absolutely flawless. She had even arranged to eliminate the night guard as well, to erase every trace of evidence. But the moment she stepped out of the dark corridor, an icy voice, as if from beyond the grave, cut off her escape. Cold-blooded enough to murder your own niece without a moment's hesitation. You truly are a heartless woman, Chloe Ante. Torchlight blazed to life throughout the dungeon, revealing Emperor Thierry, his advisor, and a full contingent of soldiers who had been lying in wait all along. Standing before the imposing emperor, the Countess trembled, desperately searching for a way to deny it all. But the advisor cut her off coldly. Don't waste your breath denying it any further. We've been tracking your every move from the very beginning. Did you really think your bribe money could buy off a prison guard? In truth, he said, you walked straight into our trap yourselves. Sarira Walt is your niece after all. How could the royal family possibly afford to let its guard down? The tyrant's gaze burned with a sharp, piercing intensity, as though trying to see straight through her soul. You weren't acting alone, were you? Who is your accomplice, Chloe Ante? If you refuse to cooperate, I doubt you'd want to imagine what awaits you. Meanwhile, in the flower-filled royal garden, Alicia strolled leisurely alongside the Wolf Rue. But her mind remained completely tangled by Thierry's sudden invitation before he left. An arrogant tyrant, one who should have issued commands with total authority, had instead humbled himself to gently ask for her opinion. Alicia blushed faintly, her heart racing at the realization that Thierry truly did have feelings for her. But her joy was fleeting, and fear quickly overtook her once more. Thierry still suspected she was Rari. If he discovered she truly was Rari, the woman he had harbored resentment toward all this time for vanishing so suddenly, would that truth push her toward an even more brutal fate? Overwhelmed with confusion, she could only wrap her arms around Rue and sigh helplessly about the upcoming social gathering. Just as her thoughts churned like a tangled skein of thread, a familiar warm voice called out, "Princess Alicia, it's Ethan Riyad." The pink-haired, elegant young man bowing to her courteously. When Alicia, flustered, apologized for her earlier rudeness, not having realized he was a count, Ethan smiled gently and explained that he was merely a second son, and the title of count had already passed to his elder brother. Alicia suddenly recalled that, in the original novel, Ethan had only played a very minor role. No wonder she hadn't been able to place him right away. The Wolf Rue growled warily at the stranger, but fortunately, Alicia quickly managed to calm him down, and the two of them sat together in the cool shade of a tree. Ethan expressed his outrage upon hearing that Alicia had been hurt during the hunting tournament, insisting that whoever the villain was deserved the harshest punishment imaginable. He silently blamed the Emperor for forcing her to take part in such a dangerous event. Seeing Ethan's expression full of worry and indignation, Alicia blinked in confusion, which made him blush and apologize awkwardly for having spoken out of turn. Ethan scratched his cheek, then gathered his courage to finally reveal the real reason for his visit today. "The truth is," he said, "I came here because I wanted to see you, Princess." He hesitantly spoke of his repeated futile trips back to the library, all because he couldn't stop thinking of her. And then Ethan bowed slightly, gazing deep into her eyes with tenderness, and slowly delivered a sweet invitation. "The coming-of-age gathering is just around the corner. If the princess doesn't yet have an escort, might I have the honor of accompanying you?" Ethan's unexpected offer left Alicia completely stunned, and at that very moment, Thierry was frantically searching for her elsewhere. Having finished his distant watch duty, Oscar approached to report to the Emperor. Seeing that Thierry appeared to be making good progress with the princess, the knight couldn't resist tossing out a few teasing remarks, suggesting the Emperor lean into his pitiful, sympathetic act once more to win her over. In return for such heartfelt advice, he received a heaven-sent punch from the tyrant. "Stop your chattering and get back to your duties." Oscar clutched his swollen head, weeping bitterly, while Thierry coldly continued on his way. But the instant Alicia's figure came into view behind a tree trunk, the smile on Thierry's lips froze instantly. Before her, a man with pink hair knelt on one knee, gazing at her with unmistakable affection, and a blaze of fury lit up the Emperor's eyes. Just who in the world is that man? Rewinding to a moment earlier, Alicia was still standing there, stunned by Ethan Riyadh's invitation to be her companion. In the original novel, she had never even woken from her coma, and the story's deviation was now pushing everything far beyond its original course. Noticing her prolonged silence, Ethan hesitantly asked if that meant she was refusing. Alicia wrestled internally. Wasn't this, she wondered, an incredible opportunity? If she agreed to go with Ethan, she'd have a perfect chance to bring the female lead Ariadne closer to Thierry, helping him find peace and finally let go of his feelings for her. But the moment that thought crossed her mind, a strange, sharp ache pierced through Alicia's heart. Before she could reach a decision, the wolf Rue suddenly let out a fierce growl. Thierry had appeared without her even noticing, pressing down on the atmosphere with a terrifying wave of jealousy. Ethan hurried to bow before the Emperor, introducing himself as the second son of the House of Riyadh. In response to Thierry's cold question about the relationship between the two of them, Alicia stammered an explanation that they had simply crossed paths by chance at the Royal Library. She quickly changed the subject, asking what business had brought him here. Thierry, flushing slightly, said, "I came here to find you, and I want to hear your answer to the question I asked before." Ethan's plan to be Alicia's escort had collapsed entirely. Recalling his advisor's advice, Thierry suddenly softened his intimidating demeanor. He lowered his voice, revealing a pitiful puppy dog gaze directed at her. "I won't force you," he said. "The decision is entirely yours to make." Faced with Thierry's pitiful yet undeniably cunning puppy-eyed look, Alicia's resolve completely crumbled. She had no choice but to turn to Ethan, bowing her head in apologetic regret. "I'm sorry, Ethan. I truly treasure your offer, but I'm afraid I have to decline." Though deeply disappointed, Ethan maintained his gracious composure and accepted her decision, bowing to the Emperor before quickly taking his leave. And the moment his figure had vanished, Thierry immediately turned to interrogate Alicia, his irritation impossible to hide. "He just invited you to the ball, didn't he? And why are the two of you close enough to call each other by first name like that?" Explaining that it was simply a polite way of addressing him since he hadn't yet been knighted, Alicia couldn't help but silently mock the great Emperor's childish jealousy. Love truly does turn even the smartest people into fools, she thought. But just as she was still lost in that thought, Thierry blushed, lifting his gaze to look at her with unmistakable sincerity. "So, will you go to the ball with me then?" "Yes," she said. "I'm truly looking forward to it." Alicia nodded gently in agreement. Neither of them realized that behind the old tree trunk, Ethan Riyadh had never actually left. He stood silently in the shadows, his fist clenched so tight it drew blood. That filthy half-fairy scum! How dare he! The air in the royal garden still lingered with awkwardness after Thierry's jealous outburst. Trying to break the silence, Alicia timidly asked about the progress of the investigation into the poisoned arrowhead. Thierry raised an eyebrow and revealed in a low voice that the liquid on the arrow had indeed come from the pochi flower. He recounted the testing process, describing how rats injected with the poison had gone into a frenzy, their speed and strength surging abnormally. This matched perfectly with how Alicia's white horse had suddenly gone wild in the forest. When Alicia asked whether Sarira had confessed who was behind it, Thierry simply answered, "She's dead." But it wasn't suicide. The true mastermind behind everything, he revealed, was Countess Ante, who had cruelly killed her own niece with her own hands to silence her for good. Faced with the threat of losing her entire title and the lives of her whole family, she had been forced to betray her true master. Duke Rupert had agreed to become a double agent and send off a fake report claiming everything was still proceeding smoothly. Hearing Thierry recount the entire affair, Alicia couldn't help but shudder in horror at Countess Ante's sheer cruelty. Then she smiled softly with relief. "I'm glad I was able to help in some small way," she said. Thierry gazed at her quietly, his crimson eyes reflecting the image of the young woman before him. Memories of his childhood suddenly came rushing back, of when he was still a frail, helpless boy, chased by wild beasts through the dark, deep forest. It was Rari who had appeared then, torch blazing like a savior sent to rescue him, gently tending to his wounds. Snapping back to the present, Thierry's gaze filled with resolve and deep affection. I'm sorry. Whether or not your memories ever return no longer matters to me. In this life, I will protect you, no matter the cost. As the sunset bathed the palace in red in a quiet corner of the tea room, Ariadne, the original novel's female lead, sat lost in thought over a book. When a familiar figure walked in, "My lord, you something, please check." Ariadne called out to him joyfully. He frowned slightly, reminding her in a stern tone that she must call him brother. "Be careful," he warned. "Don't let that name slip out again. You're the only one who knows my true identity after all." Watching her brother, who had been coming and going from the palace so frequently lately, Ariadne couldn't help but wonder whether he was truly interested in palace affairs, or if it was actually because of someone else entirely. Ariadne's crimson eyes studied Ethan intently, recalling the moment she'd accidentally witnessed him speaking with Princess Alicia in the royal library, so warm and intimate. Was she the reason he'd been frequenting the palace all this time? Noticing this, Ethan cunningly offered his sister sweet, empty promises. "Once I have the Empire firmly in my grasp," he said, "you'll always be right by my side. You have nothing to fear." Ariadne immediately broke into a happy smile. "Yes," she said, "I trust you completely." But the moment he stepped out of the room, his gentle smile instantly twisted into contempt. To him, humans were nothing but foolish creatures, easily led by the nose through mere appearances. He silently clenched the eerie red gemstone in his hand, burning with the desire to find Rari's soul as soon as possible, to finally bring this tedious charade to an end. A month later, the royal coming-of-age ceremony was finally held, in the most magnificent and extravagant splendor the palace had ever seen. The royal herald's fanfare rang out powerfully, shattering the bustling atmosphere of the ballroom, as the Emperor and Princess Alicia stepped into the Great Hall together. Under thousands of astonished, envious gazes from the nobility, Thierry and Alicia walked side by side like a match made by fate itself. Alicia looked dazzling in an intricate golden gown designed exclusively by Madame Valentina. Glancing at Thierry's commanding, magnetic presence beside her, her mind drifted back to the days before. Days spent exhausted, trying on hundreds of dresses with no budget limit, all arranged by Thierry. Just the thought of it alone was enough to wear her out again. Noticing her glaring at him in frustration, Thierry leaned in slightly and whispered close to her ear, "You look absolutely stunning tonight. I can't seem to take my eyes off you." His words left Alicia flushed with embarrassment. But the romantic mood didn't last long before it was abruptly extinguished by the arrival of Duke Rupert, leader of the rebel faction, approaching along with his daughter to pay his respects. Noticing the man's unusually quiet demeanor lately, Thierry didn't hold back, delivering a sharp, mocking remark about how much the Duke seemed to meddle in his marriage affairs. Cornered by the Emperor's remark, the Duke redirected his attack toward Alicia instead. Putting on a fake smile, he used the guise of concern for the future to humiliate her in front of everyone. Considering the princess's status as a hostage here, wouldn't marrying an imperial citizen for her own protection be the wisest choice for her? His thinly veiled contempt drew mocking laughter from the surrounding nobles. But Alicia was no fragile princess who could be so easily bullied. She clenched her fists, lifted her chin high, and offered a composed, dignified smile. "How thoughtful of you, Duke," she said. "Not only concerned with His Majesty's marriage, but troubling yourself with my affairs too. I hear you're already buried under state affairs. Are you certain you can handle the extra burden?" Alicia's sharp counterattack left the Duke seething with rage, his face turning purple. Before he could even respond, Thierry stepped forward, placing himself squarely between the Duke and Alicia. Duke Rupert, his eyes blazed like fire, radiating a chilling aura that swept over the entire hall, leaving everyone trembling. "If you dare imply that the princess is merely a hostage," he said, "I will consider it a direct insult to me personally, and to this entire empire. Remember this, Alicia is an honored guest of the royal family." The Emperor's ironclad declaration left the crowd murmuring in astonishment. Every scheme Duke Rupert had woven to place his daughter on the throne as empress had now gone up in smoke. Standing beneath the brilliant chandeliers, the Duke glared at Alicia, his eyes burning with fury and deep-seated hatred. "You will pay dearly for this humiliation today." After he turned and walked away, Alicia couldn't help but wonder about Thierry's blatant hostility toward Duke Rupert just now. Thierry explained calmly that by publicly acknowledging her as an honored guest in front of all the nobility, he had indirectly shielded her from any further threats the Duke might pose. This humiliation, he said, would push the Duke into a corner, likely provoking him into even more reckless decisions. Hearing this, Alicia suddenly understood, realizing that all his attentiveness and his invitation to be her dance partner tonight had all been part of his plan to deal with the Duke. As the music began to play, sweet and flowing, Thierry bowed gently and extended his hand toward her. "Princess," he said, "would I have the honor of this dance with you?" Held securely in his strong arms, the two of them swept and spun across the magnificent hall, creating a breathtaking scene that left everyone watching in awe. To escape the countless prying eyes, Alicia asked Thierry for permission to step out onto the balcony for some fresh air. Standing beneath the starlit night sky, she let out a soft, relieved sigh, mocking herself for ever fantasizing that Thierry truly had feelings for her. But that peaceful quiet was soon interrupted when Ethan Riyadh suddenly appeared behind her. Princess Alicia. His sudden appearance left Alicia startled. She immediately realized that if Ethan was here, then Thierry and the female lead Ariadne must be meeting for the very first time inside the ballroom right now. The wheel of fate from the original story had finally begun to turn. When Ethan gently asked about the nature of her relationship with the Tyrant, Alicia deflected, claiming it was purely a political alliance. But Ethan seemed to want to dig deeper. "So that means the Emperor has absolutely no romantic feelings for you at all?" The question struck right at the heart of Alicia's own uncertainty. Thierry's childlike smiles, his genuine concern for her, she knew none of it was fake. But she wasn't the real Alicia at all. She was merely Rari's soul, borrowing another woman's body. Alicia suddenly posed a deeply philosophical question. "Have you ever felt uncertain about who you truly are?" This question had always haunted her mind. The soul of the late maid Rari, inhabiting the body of the present-day Princess Alicia. Who was she really? Why had she died? If Thierry truly had feelings for Alicia, would his heart change if she suddenly became someone else entirely? This uncertainty left her utterly unable to decide anything about her future. Seeing the sorrow in her eyes, Ethan comforted her gently, his voice warm and soothing. "But a mask," he said, "is still just a mask underneath. Someday you'll find someone who sees straight through you, to your true self. Perhaps that person is closer than you think." Just as the atmosphere between them was beginning to feel strange, a panicked voice suddenly called out, cutting through the moment. "Brother!" Ariadne rushed over, her face streaked with tears. "Where did you disappear to? I've been looking everywhere for you." With that, she threw herself into Ethan's arms, clinging to him in fear. Ariadne's tight embrace around Ethan made Alicia flinch slightly. But what unsettled her even more was the look in the original female lead's eyes. From behind her brother's shoulder, Ariadne shot Alicia a sharp, venomous glare filled with hostility. The baseless jealousy left Alicia utterly speechless. What was that about, she thought, as if I'm trying to steal her man or something. Using exhaustion and a headache as an excuse, Ariadne kept urging her brother to leave, even though this was supposed to be her own coming-of-age celebration. Sensing this situation, Alicia tactfully excused herself, letting the siblings sort things out on their own. Ethan bowed slightly, his eyes filled with an indescribable, indulgent warmth directed at her. The moment they were out of sight down the hallway, Ethan's true nature finally revealed itself. When his sister asked about his approach to the princess, the warmth that usually filled his eyes vanished instantly. "I sought her out deliberately," he said. "The princess is currently the person closest to the tyrant. If I play this pawn carefully enough, I'll find the weakness needed to topple his throne." His only goal was the crown. Nothing more, and he held no personal feelings for Alicia whatsoever. He sneered that Thierry's feelings for her were nothing but a one-sided delusion, while she was merely playing along for political gain. And yet, he clenched his fist and thought quietly to himself, "I have searched for her for so long. It's only a matter of time before she realizes her true self, and I will absolutely never allow anyone to steal her from me again." Back in the ballroom, Alicia remained lost in thought over Ethan's words, when Thierry suddenly spoke up, asking after her. Startled, she stumbled, her high heel accidentally twisting beneath her. "Oh, my foot." Before she could fall, Thierry caught her in a flash. And to Alicia's astonishment, he didn't hesitate for a moment, sweeping her up in a decisive princess carry. "Hold still!" Thierry's voice came low and commanding. yet filled with unmistakable warmth. The sudden intimate gesture in the middle of the ballroom made Alicia's face flush as red as a ripe tomato. Her heart pounded so hard it felt ready to leap from her chest. Carrying her back to her private room, Thierry gently set her down in a chair. She watched, stunned, as the noble emperor didn't hesitate for a second to kneel on one knee before her. He gently removed her high-heeled shoe and began softly massaging her injured ankle. Alicia panicked. "Your Majesty, what are you doing? I just need to rest a little, I'll be fine." Thierry frowned slightly. His warm hands gently soothed the pain in her ankle. "Why would you let your foot swell up like this?" he asked. "You may feel fine, but I don't." His crimson eyes looked up at her, filled with such tenderness that Alicia went completely still. What was this unconditional concern? Why had this cold-hearted tyrant been treating her with such strange kindness lately? The tyrant's sudden gentleness left her flustered enough to ask outright, "Why are you suddenly being so kind to me?" When Thierry plainly admitted that of course he'd worry, seeing her ankle swollen like that. Alicia's heart clenched. Does he really like me? But as if trying to mask his true feelings and avoid putting any pressure on her, Thierry added coolly, "My actions don't carry any deeper meaning, so there's no need to feel burdened at all." Looking at the sharp line of his jaw, Alicia's inner turmoil raged fiercely. She knew that if Thierry truly loved Alicia, continuing to hide her true identity would be a cruel thing to do. She was on the verge of telling him the truth, but at the decisive moment, fear seized her mind once again. Thinking of Thierry's stormy childhood, of the lonely boy who had endured relentless bullying and the pain of loss the moment she vanished, Alicia fought back tears. After all those years alone, it had taken him so much to finally open his heart to someone. If she suddenly shattered that now with the truth, it would only leave him with an even deeper wound. And so Alicia chose to run. She excused herself from the party early to return to her room, escorted by Oscar. Watching Thierry's sorrowful expression, Alicia resolved firmly that she needed to redirect his attention elsewhere before these feelings ran any deeper. Back in her room, Alicia drifted into an exhausted sleep on the cold balcony chair. In her hazy dream, she found herself standing barefoot on a vast, sunlit meadow of lush green grass. From high in the blue sky, a strikingly beautiful woman with hair as vivid red as blazing flames slowly descended. Before Alicia's bewildered gaze, the woman smiled gently. "I am not a dream," she said. "This is a place deep within your subconscious, and it is also my domain." Alicia was stunned as the woman gently extended her hand and revealed her identity. "My name is Podia. I am you, and you are me, Podia." Wasn't that the supreme goddess who had founded the empire itself? Before vanishing into brilliant golden flames, the goddess left behind one final mysterious plea. "I entrust the one I love, Renario, to your care." Jolted awake by Mary's gentle call, Alicia realized the sky had already brightened, the goddess's final words in the dream still lingering vividly in her mind. Why would Podia, the legendary goddess who had founded the empire, appear in her dream at all? Could this have any connection to her death in her past life? Her confusion was cut short when she noticed Mary holding a familiar orange-red scarf, a garment worn only by the palace kitchen staff. Alicia looked at the handwritten initials embroidered in the corner of the scarf, and her eyes widened in shock. Could these initials possibly belong to Maid? In the magnificent royal garden, Alicia sat restlessly at a tea table, the red scarf carefully wrapped in her hands. She thought quietly to herself, her full name is Maid Nora, this scarf definitely belongs to her. Though she worried that using the scarf as an excuse to meet might come across as forced, her longing for her old friend won out over everything else. Just then, Maid arrived in her kitchen uniform, bowing her head with deep respect. Alicia immediately broke into a radiant smile, inviting her to sit down and share a pot of tea. Alicia's obvious nervousness left Maid rather puzzled, as though the princess were paying her far too much attention. When Alicia returned the dropped scarf to her, Maid was overwhelmed with relief and gratitude. If the arrogant head chef had found it first, she would certainly have been in serious trouble. But Maid suddenly paused, asking a question that left Alicia frozen in place. "But how did the princess know my full name?" Flustered, Alicia scrambled for an excuse to cover her slip, lying that she'd been so impressed by her cooking skills that she'd taken it upon herself to ask around beforehand. Seeing the princess's obvious embarrassment, Maid couldn't help but think of her old friend Rari, A maid who had always stayed optimistic, yet had always had to tread carefully, as if walking on thin ice. To dispel the awkward tension, Maid took the initiative and pulled out her notebook, asking about the princess's food preferences. When Alicia revealed she preferred meat over vegetables, hated cucumbers, loved sweets, and especially apple pie, Maid suddenly froze. "Your tastes," she said, "are remarkably similar to an old friend of mine." Maid spoke in a low voice about the years the two of them had spent together in poverty, how she used to secretly sneak extra food in the kitchen for her maid friend, and how that friend's favorite dish of all had been apple pie. Listening to Maud's nostalgic recollections, Alicia's heart clenched tightly. It turned out Maud still remembered every last little detail about her. Alicia gently mentioned that she too had once had an old friend back in Astat, exactly like Maud, someone who had always been her emotional anchor. Moved by the shared understanding, Maud opened up further, offering to be someone the princess could always talk to whenever she needed. "Really? I'm so happy, Maud." The sheer joy made Alicia forget all etiquette and blurt out her happiness openly. Though she still couldn't reveal her true identity, Alicia felt an overwhelming sense of contentment, knowing her dearest friend had returned to her life once more. Elsewhere, another storm was brewing at the Duke's estate. In a dark room, Duke Rupert slammed his fist on the table, grinding his teeth in fury over the unexpected obstacle Alicia had created. He simply could not accept that his plan to place Sylvia on the throne as empress had been derailed by a worthless hostage. Just then, a servant rushed in breathlessly to report urgent news. "My lord, we have just found someone with an appearance identical to that of Rari, the maid who once served His Majesty." The news made Duke Rupert's expression shift instantly, a dark, ruthless new scheme igniting in his eyes. Beneath an ancient tree dyed golden by autumn, Alicia, the maid Mary, and the sous chef Maud were enjoying a peaceful picnic together. Maud shyly brought out a freshly baked, fragrant apple pie, hoping the princess would enjoy it. As Alicia took her first bite, her face lit up with radiant delight at the incredible flavor. "Absolutely delicious," she said. "This is the best apple pie I've ever had in my life." Her sincere praise left Maud sighing with relief. Noticing Mary hesitating, too shy to eat, feeling she didn't deserve it, Alicia gently encouraged her. "Food always tastes better," she said, "when shared with the people you love." But then a small mishap occurred. Mary accidentally dropped a piece of pie onto the grass. Full of regret, she looked up in shock to see Alicia swiftly snatch the piece of pie up off the ground and pop it right into her mouth. Mary cried out in alarm, "Princess, why would you eat something off the ground?" Alicia laughed mischievously, holding up 3 fingers with total confidence. "Haven't you heard of the 3-second rule?" she said. "As long as you pick it up within 3 seconds, it's still perfectly fine to eat." That gesture left Maud utterly frozen in place. In her mind, memories of her late friend Rari came flooding back, playing out like a slow-motion film reel. Long ago, when she had once dropped a cookie, Rari had picked it up just as quickly and confidently declared that very same so-called 3-second rule. Watching Alicia before her, Maud couldn't help but wonder to herself, the princess truly shares far too many similarities with Rari. Even though her appearance and voice are completely different, could this air about her really just be pure coincidence? Nearby, Thierry stood silently, watching their laughter-filled picnic. Seeing Alicia smile so radiantly and freely beside Maud, his heart ached with a flicker of disappointment and jealousy. She can't even bring herself to look me in the eye. Yet with the sous chef, she smiles this brightly. I thought the distance between us had finally started closing since the hunting tournament. But after the coming-of-age ball, that distance seems to have only grown wider again. What must I do to truly earn her trust? While Thierry's troubled thoughts remained unresolved, his advisor rushed in, breathless, to report shocking news. Duke Rupert had requested an urgent audience this afternoon, claiming he had found Rari, the emperor's maid from years past. The shocking news struck like a bolt from the blue, Thierry's eyes widening in disbelief. At the same moment, Duke Rupert's lavish carriage slowly rolled toward the imperial palace. Seated across from him was a young woman whose face was an exact match for the late maid Rari. The Duke spoke coldly, issuing a warning. "Have you memorized every detail I gave you?" he asked. "There must be absolutely no mistakes. If you fail, you'll pay with your life." "Of course, Your Grace," she said, flashing a smug, satisfied smile. The carriage door opened, and a young woman wearing Rari's face stepped out, proud and confident before the steps of the imperial palace. Inside the palace, giving the Duke no room to dance around the matter, Thierry went straight to the point with a sharp, icy question. Duke Robert, is it truly true that you have found my former maid, Rari, or do you think you can deceive me with an impostor just like everyone else has tried? Facing the Emperor's blazing gaze, the cunning Duke skillfully spun a flawless story. He claimed that his servant had found a young woman unconscious in a rundown alley of the old quarter a month ago. Upon waking, the girl had identified herself as Rari, the prince's childhood maid, saying she had been kidnapped and had only just managed to escape. Though the story had plenty of holes, given that Rari had been missing for a full 7 years, the Duke insisted the girl not only looked exactly like Rari, but also knew intimate secrets and details about the Emperor's childhood. Seeing Thierry's skepticism, the Duke suggested His Majesty verify it for himself. The moment the throne room doors opened, a young woman with brown hair and a tear-streaked face stepped inside, calling out shyly, "Your Majesty, do you still recognize me?" Facing that painfully familiar visage, Thierry's heart gave a slight jolt. Meanwhile, at the library, Alicia was still struggling to uncover her own true identity through the pages of history. The goddess Podia's words from her dream, "I am you, and you are me," clung to her mind like a haunting ghost. She wondered what it could possibly mean for the supreme goddess who had founded the empire to appear in her dream. But her confusion was quickly cut short by the frightened whispers of maids gossiping throughout the palace. Trembling, they reported shocking news. Yesterday, a special guest had been brought to the palace, someone who had once served His Majesty in years past. Just then, in the hallway, Alicia froze at the sight before her. Thierry was strolling side by side with a young woman whose face was identical to hers in her past life. The girl clung to him playfully, asking him to walk her around the garden, skillfully apologizing with gestures that felt eerily familiar. Spotting Alicia from a distance, Thierry called out softly to her, "Princess?" But before she could even react, the impostor stepped forward first, bowing with proud composure. "It's truly an honor to meet you, Princess. I'm Rari, His Majesty's former maid." Oh my God, Alicia's heart nearly stopped beating. How could there possibly be someone on this earth who matched her past self down to the tiniest detail? Alicia's shock quickly turned into utter dread as she watched the woman casually reach up to fix Thierry's hair. Recalling their childhood promise, "When you were little, you always cried and begged me never to leave your side. And now look at us." Alicia stood rooted to the spot, her mind completely blank. The promise to stay together forever was a sacred secret known only to Thierry and her from their past life. How could a total stranger possibly know something so intimate? When Thierry agreed to let the woman follow him into his study, Alicia could only clutch the hem of her dress, trembling, watching their figures disappear together in the distance. A question screamed and surged within her mind. What on earth is going on? If she really is Rari, then who am I? Returning from that shattering encounter, Alicia's mind spiraled into chaos. The woman claiming to be Rari didn't just have an identical face to her past self. She also knew every mannerism, every tone of voice, and every private memory between her and Thierry. Alicia could only think of one explanation. Some spy must have been secretly watching her and the prince at the villa all those years ago, gathering information. Just then, Oscar suddenly appeared beside Alicia. When she asked about the source of it all, Oscar sighed and confirmed that it was indeed Duke Rupert who had brought the woman here. "I honestly thought His Majesty would have executed the Duke on the spot," he said. "Anyone who's ever tried this imposter trick before has always met an absolutely brutal end." Oscar's words left Alicia quietly troubled. If Thierry wasn't punishing her immediately, it meant he genuinely believed the woman was real. Oscar speculated further that His Majesty was probably keeping her around the villa to see what Duke Rupert's next move would be, following the failed assassination attempt with poachy poison. Right after that, Thierry's sudden appearance in the hallway cut their conversation short. He requested a private conversation with Alicia. Beside a quiet tea table, the suffocating, tense atmosphere pressed down on Alicia's chest. Thierry gazed at her thoughtfully, then spoke slowly. "I want to talk about Rari. I've been searching for her all this time, seeing her again after all these years completely unchanged. Old memories keep flooding back. Rari truly means a great deal to me." "A great deal?" Alicia asked. "Don't you resent her?" She gripped her teacup tightly, hesitantly probing further. "So your Majesty has been missing her this whole time?" His eyes filled with tenderness. To me, he said, Rari was never just a maid who raised me. From the moment she vanished, I've never once forgotten her. I've always had a feeling she was still alive somewhere out there. Thierry's answer left Alicia stunned. So all this time, the resentment she had assumed he harbored had merely been a tragic misunderstanding. But she couldn't reveal the truth now, not when Thierry believed that imposter to be the real Rari. Suppressing the sharp ache in her heart, Alicia forced a smile and congratulated him. Finding her again is truly wonderful news, Your Majesty. Congratulations. Wonderful news? Thierry echoed back, his tone laced with an indescribable melancholy. Watching his figure walk away, Alicia laughed bitterly to herself. The weight of continuing to deceive him pressed down on her chest like a 1,000-pound stone. Meanwhile, in the imposter's chambers, she pointed at the tea tray, scolding her maid for brewing the tea too weak, and demanding she brew another pot. Afterward, she smiled smugly to herself, thinking of her stroke of luck in meeting Duke Rupert. Though this modest lifestyle wasn't exactly to her taste, to secure her place among the elite, she was fully prepared to play this role to the hilt. But that princess, His Majesty seems quite fond of her. I need to get rid of her before she becomes a real obstacle. With a scheming smile spreading across her face, she ordered a maid to deliver a message to Alicia. Please tell Princess Alicia, she said, that I would be truly honored if she could join me for dinner tonight. Few knew that the woman who looked exactly like Rari was, in truth, Nina, a notorious con artist with 10 years of experience under her belt. Blessed with natural acting talent, she had once swindled countless gullible men out of enormous sums of money using fake tears about a dying mother, then vanished without a trace. But even the cleverest schemer eventually meets their match. During one particular con, Nina had been caught by her victim and pursued relentlessly. Forced to flee through a dense, tangled forest, she'd believed her life was over. But then fate took an unexpected turn when she crossed paths with Duke Rupert. He had offered her a chance to change her fate entirely, turning her into the perfect pawn to get close to the Emperor. If I play this pawn well enough, she thought, I'll secure a place right beside His Majesty the Emperor. Nina smiled to herself with satisfaction, convinced she deserved a life of luxury, rather than rotting away and dying on the streets. Meanwhile, Alicia received a sudden dinner invitation from the fake Rari. Despite having only just met and exchanged a few polite words, the woman had wasted no time reaching out to her. Alicia clenched her fists. This was undoubtedly a scheme orchestrated by Duke Rupert, but she decided not to run from it. Tell her I accept, she said. This was the perfect chance to confirm her suspicions. The dinner table was set with extravagant splendor. The moment she met Alicia, Nina immediately put on a warm, welcoming smile, thanking her repeatedly for accepting the invitation. Looking at the face that matched her own past life so exactly, Alicia couldn't help but marvel. No wonder Thierry and everyone else had been so easily fooled by her. She took her seat at the table, quietly plotting to use this dinner to dig for information from the woman. But then an uninvited guest suddenly appeared at the door, Emperor Thierry. The moment she saw him, Nina instantly shifted her tone, putting on a face full of deceitful apology. Oh, I'm terribly sorry, she said. I completely forgot to inform you beforehand. I only invited the princess to dinner to grow closer to her. I never imagined it would intrude on your private time together. Her sickeningly sweet, pointed words made Alicia seethe with quiet fury. Private time, she thought. So now I'm the third wheel ruining her little performance? You're apologizing to the wrong person. With that, she smiled and stood up. It seems my presence has intruded on the two of you, she said. I'll take my leave so you can enjoy your dinner in peace. Seeing Thierry about to take his leave, Nina half-heartedly offered a hollow gesture of hospitality, urging him to stay. Alicia loathed this fake little performance so much she just wanted to leave immediately to avoid indigestion. But just as she turned to walk away, a strong hand suddenly caught her wrist. Don't go, he said. Stay and have dinner with me. The dinner that followed unfolded in an atmosphere thick with awkwardness. Alicia found herself reluctantly pulled into the meal alongside Thierry and the woman posing as Rari. The imposter kept trying every trick to grab his attention, constantly praising the food and deliberately bringing up their supposedly poverty-stricken years together to stir up the Emperor's sympathy. She even went so far as to serve food onto Thierry's plate, only to be met with a cold, flat rejection. No need, he said. I can feed myself. Watching Thierry's distant demeanor, Alicia silently mocked his pickiness, while staying sharply alert to the imposter's schemes across the table. She wondered how on earth Duke Rupert had managed to find such a flawless pawn. When the woman mentioned having already met the sous-chef Maid, Thierry began firing sharp, probing questions, testing her memories from her 7 years of supposed disappearance. Cornered, the imposter stammered, blaming her unclear memory to dodge the questions. But her bottomless greed pushed her to make an outrageously bold request. "Your Majesty," she said, "would it be possible for me to stay on the same floor as you and the princess? I'm certain it would help me recover my memories much faster." The shameless request left Alicia so furious she thought she might explode. She actually dares to copy my old habit of pestering him for favors? Fortunately, Thierry flatly refused, using the excuse of protecting her reputation from public scrutiny to bring the dinner to an early end. Sent back to her room before dinner even ended, Nina watched Thierry attentively escort Alicia away, her eyes burning with resentment. She recalled the astonished, emotional look on the Emperor's face the very first time he'd seen her face. Nina ground her teeth and swore silently to herself, "That princess will become a thorn in my side if she keeps staying by his side. I need to act quickly to drive a wedge between them. I'd planned to hold back, but it seems I'll have to use every trick I have to seduce the Emperor after all." In the quiet hallway, Alicia hesitantly asked Thierry the real reason he had refused the other woman's request. She couldn't understand how someone who had held onto his longing for Rari for so many years could suddenly be so cold toward her. Beneath the hazy, moonlit glow of the royal balcony, Thierry suddenly stepped in close, his breath so near that Alicia's heart pounded like a war drum. Her mind went completely blank as the distance between them closed. Thierry gently brushed her hair aside, his crimson eyes gazing deep into her clear ones. "The truth is," he said, "there is someone else I believe is the real Rari." Alicia looked up at him in shock, while Thierry sank into his own memories. From the day he had awakened his divine power, the respect of every noble had fallen effortlessly into his hands. He had swiftly claimed the throne, seizing supreme authority over the empire. And yet the one thing he truly longed for, Rari, had remained forever out of reach. Through the long 7-year stretch of her absence, her voice, her gestures, and her smallest habits had been the only things keeping him tethered to this life. "Even if you wear a different face," he said, "I would still know you." After making an excuse about the late hour to take his leave, Thierry thought quietly to himself, "Rari, please recover your memories soon, before my patience finally gives out completely." Back in his study, the advisor was already waiting to ask about the identity of the girl claiming to be Rari, the one Duke Rupert had just brought forward. Thierry stated coldly that, despite her astonishingly similar appearance, the resentful, jealous look she gave the princess, along with her outrageous demands, proved everything. She was nothing but a lying imposter. When the advisor asked why he hadn't dismissed her immediately, Thierry answered in a low voice, "Because Alicia is the real Rari. I want to bring them face to face, hoping that seeing Rari's old appearance might trigger her memories. Besides, this will serve as ironclad evidence to convict Duke Rupert. Their goal isn't just to settle matters within the royal court." The advisor reminded him not to let his guard down against the pure-blooded fairy clan. According to the latest reports, the fairy clan was ruthlessly hunting for the supreme fire dragon, the soul of the goddess Podia. By overthrowing the emperor and destroying Thierry, a man carrying mixed fairy blood, they hoped to re-establish their absolute dominance over the human world. Thierry rested his chin on his hand, his eyes blazing crimson with authority. "I will never, under any circumstances, let that happen." Meanwhile, at Duke Rupert's office, the fake Rari arrived to report on the situation. She confidently declared that the emperor now completely trusted her identity. But she also couldn't resist complaining that Alicia had become an incredibly irritating thorn in her side, keeping the emperor cold and distant toward her. Noticing that Thierry seemed to have found a new toy in Princess Alicia, abandoning his old maid entirely, Duke Rupert coldly ordered her to withdraw from the palace at the appropriate time and collect her promised reward. But her greed and ambition ran far deeper than just a modest sum of money. She flashed a cunning smile, holding the Duke back. "Your Grace," she said, "don't you think withdrawing now would be far too premature? If His Majesty marries the princess, your family will gain absolutely nothing from all this." Under Rupert's astonished, calculating gaze, she stepped closer, calmly proposing an outrageous bargain. I have a flawless plan to eliminate the princess and rightfully take my place beside His Majesty as the most powerful woman in the empire. Adopt me as your daughter. Father. Not long after, Alicia burst into tears of joy when Mary brought her wonderful news. A reply letter from the Kingdom of Astat had officially arrived. Just as Thierry had promised, she had finally received word from home. Every word overflowed with relief, joy, and the loving concern of her family, warming her heart in a way she couldn't describe. What a blessing to know everyone back home was safe and well. But another letter resting on the tray made Alicia freeze. That letter bore the seal of someone extremely dangerous, Duke Rupert. 2 weeks later, thanks to Mary's skillful hands, Alicia stepped out in the most magnificent and elegant ball gown, ready to attend a tea party at the Duke's estate. Though she had received countless invitations after the ball, Alicia knew she couldn't ignore Rupert's invitation the way she had the others. She thought quietly about the estate's reputation for rare, exotic flowers. Could there be some dangerous plant growing there, like the poachy flower? Riding in the carriage toward the Duke's estate, Oscar couldn't help but worry about the sly old fox Rupert's true intentions. Alicia smiled calmly to reassure him, knowing full well he wouldn't be foolish enough to make a move in broad daylight. But recalling Thierry's stern warning before she left, guard the princess closely no matter what. Don't let her out of your sight for even a second. Oscar broke into a cold sweat and firmly reminded her to stay within his sight at all times. The Duke's estate appeared before them, breathtakingly opulent, adorned with countless rare and exotic plants. As Alicia quietly observed the Duke from a distance, searching for any clues, a familiar, warm voice suddenly sounded beside her ear. "Princess Alicia?" It was Ethan Riyad. He greeted her with a graceful, gentle smile. Knowing Thierry was away on a distant inspection, and that she was escorted only by the knight Oscar, Ethan took the initiative to approach and strike up a conversation. He sighed softly, apologizing for his sister Ariadne's unreasonably hostile attitude that night, but Alicia quickly waved it off, assuring him she had already forgotten all about it. When she asked after Ariadne, Ethan explained that his sister had caught a mild cold and had to stay home to recover. At the mention of his sister's absence, Ethan's gaze suddenly deepened. He took a small step forward, abruptly closing the distance between them. "So it seems," he said, "we'll be able to talk today without anyone interrupting us." His warm breath, so close it nearly touched her skin, made Alicia flinch with sudden unease. Ethan leaned in close to her ear, whispering with unmistakable affection. "That night, our time together was far too brief, and it left me with genuine regret. I've been waiting eagerly for the day I'd see you again, Princess." His words left Alicia's mind spinning in confusion. Does he like me? Or am I just overthinking this? The conversation between Alicia and Ethan was suddenly interrupted by the arrival of Count André Riyad, Ethan's older brother. Unlike his younger brother's gentle, delicate appearance, as fragile as a flower, Count André radiated an imposing, solid presence, like an ancient oak tree. The stark contrast between the two Riyad brothers left Alicia deeply curious. Rumor had it that Ethan had been terribly frail as a child and had to live in seclusion in a remote countryside, only recently emerging into high society. This kept Oscar quietly wary, constantly watching Ethan from a distance with a cautious eye. He keeps hovering around the princess, he thought. I need to keep a close watch on him. The atmosphere suddenly grew noisy with the malicious whispers and gossip of the surrounding nobles. They kept pointing at Alicia, mocking her for attending the party alone without the emperor's escort, while also spinning tales about the return of Thierry's legendary Maid, claiming it meant she had fallen out of favor. Weary of these prying stares, Alicia knew full well this was all part of Duke Rupert's scheme targeting her. When the Duke called Count André away, Ethan remained firmly by Alicia's side, worried for her safety. Noticing her obvious discomfort, he gently brought up the rumors about the emperor's former maid returning. "Are you truly all right?" he asked. "The last time we spoke, you mentioned you weren't certain who you really are. I get the feeling you're trapping yourself within your own body. Perhaps it's because you feel so alone in this unfamiliar kingdom. If it's all right with you, I don't want you to have to bear it alone." Ethan's heartfelt words struck the most painful hidden corner of Alicia's soul. When she had first awakened in this body, after the initial shock had worn off, an overwhelming sense of loneliness and emptiness had crushed her the moment she realized she had lost Thierry. And now, even after being reunited with him, she still felt she no longer had a place beside such a noble emperor. But Alicia only smiled gently. "Thank you, Ethan," she said, "but I have no intention of running away from these feelings." She made a silent promise to herself. Fate had surely brought her back for a reason, and she would never again vanish from Thierry's life. Just then, Duke Rupert's booming applause rang out. "Everyone, may I have your attention," he announced. "Today I have a truly momentous piece of news to share." The sly old fox Rupert wore a triumphant smile, leading the fake Rari forward by the hand, before the astonished eyes of the assembled nobility. "Allow me to formally introduce my future adopted daughter, Lady Rari." The announcement struck like a bolt from the blue, leaving everyone utterly stunned. The imposter stepped forward in splendid attire, her eyes brimming with defiance as she looked toward Alicia. Before the wheels of Duke Rupert's scheme had even begun to turn, wait, it was actually Thierry who had tried his best to stop Alicia from attending this suspicious tea party. He had urged her to simply ignore it, even declaring that anyone who dared gossip could just have their mouths shut for good. But Alicia hadn't wanted to back herself into a corner. Refusing an invitation from someone as influential as Duke Rupert, right after her own social debut, would only invite a flood of malicious rumors. Seeing her resolve, Thierry had no choice but to reluctantly concede. Back in his study now, he sighed anxiously as the Duke's tea party officially began without him. Just then, the advisor hurried in with a secret letter, delayed in delivery due to the rain. The letter's contents immediately made Thierry frown. Duke Rupert planned to publicly adopt the imposter at today's tea party. She wanted to elevate her social standing so that Rupert could then legitimately maneuver her into becoming empress in the future. Thierry crushed the letter furiously in his fist and declared firmly, "I have already gathered all the evidence I need regarding the Pochi poison case. It's time we put an end to this tedious farce once and for all." In the Duke's magnificent garden, Rupert publicly declared before the entire nobility that he would adopt the former maid Rari into the Rupert family, as a way of repaying her for raising his majesty in his youth. His declaration sent the crowd buzzing with astonished murmurs. By forcing the emperor to marry his adopted daughter, the Duke sought to completely strip away her influence and cement his family's power. That was the sole reason he had invited her here today. Feeling utterly exhausted and disgusted by this fake performance, Alicia quickly made an excuse to slip away. Ethan watched the princess's retreating figure in silence, a knowing smile spreading across his lips. This situation, he thought, actually works out rather well for my own plans. In a quiet corner of the garden, the fake Rari basked in triumph, thrilled at how smoothly the first stage of her plan had unfolded. She began savoring the sensation of being catered to and respected by the maids, drunk on the intoxicating taste of power, forgetting entirely that the net of justice was closing tightly around her. She was now waiting for the sous chef, Maid, to arrive. When Maid approached with a stern, somewhat distant expression, the imposter greeted her with overwhelming warmth, insisting her old friend needn't be so formal with her. But her overly eager approach only stirred deep suspicion within Maid. Studying the woman's radiant face, the instincts of a friend who had known the real Rari for years told Maid that the woman before her was absolutely not the true Rari. Her eyes narrowed with wary attention, and she lifted the small bamboo basket in her hands. "I've prepared a special gift just for you, Rari," she said. This was, in fact, a test to determine whether the woman truly was her longtime friend. 4 days after the tea party, news of Duke Rupert adopting the mysterious imposter spread rapidly throughout the palace. Overwhelming anxiety gripped Alicia as Thierry's return drew near, and she wondered desperately how she could expose the imposter without revealing her own true identity as Rari. The thought of Thierry actually marrying the imposter made her shudder and silently scream in her heart. No, she absolutely could not let her beloved Thierry marry such a professional con artist. Lost in thought, the wolf Rue suddenly caught the scent of something strange and let out a fierce growl. Following the wolf's gaze, Alicia was stunned to spot the imposter casually enjoying tea with her old friend Maid. At the tea table, the imposter feigned being touched by Maudet's thoughtfulness, playing the role of a loyal, close-hearted friend. But Maudet was far from naive. She deliberately brought up a fabricated old memory, about the time the two of them had gone fishing for the prince, and both caught a cold. Watching the imposter hastily play along with her fabricated lie, Maudet smiled coldly inside. In truth, the prince had once been furious with Rari for acting recklessly, to the point of refusing to even taste his food and staying up all night worrying about her. Realizing that Maid was deliberately probing her, the imposter quickly steered the conversation toward a plate of bread on the table. She took a large bite and heaped praise on the sandwich, especially the refreshing taste of the cucumber. But she had no idea this was precisely the trap Maid had laid for her all along. Maud's gaze lowered. This person's memory truly has changed a great deal, she thought. As a child, you hated the smell of cucumber so much you couldn't even stand being near it. I deliberately minced the cucumbers this time, but the real Rari would have noticed instantly thanks to her keen sense of smell. The imposter froze, her secret exposed, her whole body going rigid. Just as the tension was reaching its peak, a thunderous roar tore through the air. The massive black wolf Rue lunged straight toward the tea table, sending the imposter screaming in terror. Alicia rushed forward to hold the wolf back, gently stroking it to calm it down. Watching how naturally Alicia was able to tame the ferocious wolf, Maid couldn't help but be stunned. Deep down, she thought, Princess Alicia's presence and mannerisms right now resemble Rari far more than the trembling woman sitting before her. The imposter stammered an excuse, insisting that 7 years was simply too long for the wolf to still remember her. But Thierry's sudden arrival cut through everything at once. The moment she spotted His Majesty, the imposter immediately put on a tearful act, throwing herself into Thierry's arms with exaggerated affection, lamenting how heartbroken she was that the wolf no longer recognized her. Watching this shamelessly fake performance, Alicia was so furious she saw stars, silently sneering at the woman's acting skills. Thierry gently patted the imposter's back, offering a knowing smile. "What a shame," he said, "but he used to adore you. I'm sure he'll warm back up to you soon enough. To rebuild that bond, why don't you join me for our daily walks with him starting tomorrow?" The suggestion left the imposter frozen in place, her mind spinning in disbelief. It can't be, she thought. Is he actually serious? Faced with the terrifying prospect of walking that massive, ferocious wolf every single day, the imposter's face drained of all color and fear. She quickly clutched her head, feigning dizziness, and begged to be excused to rest in her room. Watching the imposter shuffle off in disarray, Alicia smiled quietly to herself. But once Maid had also left, reality's awkwardness settled back in around her. Now, in the magnificent hallway, only the two of them remained. To break the awkward silence, Alicia asked casually how he'd managed to return so much earlier than expected. "I rushed back," he said, "all because of one particular person." His intense, unwavering gaze sent Alicia's heart racing. To hide her own flustered nerves, she quickly reminded him of Duke Rupert's plan to adopt the imposter and the swirling rumors among the nobility about an upcoming marriage. But Thierry only sighed softly. "How absurd," he said. "That's exactly why I rushed back so quickly. I was afraid you'd hear those ridiculous rumors and misunderstand me." To Alicia's astonishment, Thierry repeated what he'd said the day before. "I once told you there was someone else I believed to be the real Rari. Do you remember?" Alicia nodded, surprised, and then Thierry's warm, low voice rang out, striking straight into her heart. "That person is none other than you, Princess Alicia." In that moment during the hunt when he'd seen her in danger, his chest had nearly burst with the fear of losing her. And when he'd found her hiding in that secret tree hollow, a place only Rari and he had ever known, his instincts had given him an absolute answer. "My mind kept telling me it was impossible, but every cell, every instinct in my body screamed that you were Rari." He gently lifted her chin, his crimson eyes gazing deep into hers, pleading. "Who are you, truly?" he asked. "If you're not Rari, does that mean I've simply gone mad with longing for her, clinging to you instead?" Thierry's heartfelt, sorrowful confession left Alicia stunned, realizing at last how completely she had misunderstood him all this time. She had once believed he hated her, once believed he'd been fooled by the imposter. But it turned out Thierry had seen through her true identity from the very beginning. He had never once had a change of heart. Seeing her silence, Thierry mocked himself and turned to walk away, not forgetting to promise he would personally clean up the mess the Duke had created. But watching his lonely, retreating figure, Alicia knew she couldn't keep running away any longer. She reached out and grabbed his hand, holding it tightly. "Your Majesty," she said softly, "there's something I need to tell you." She no longer wanted, nor could she bear to keep deceiving Thierry. "Your Majesty, what I'm about to say may sound utterly absurd. Are you willing to listen? Receiving his firm, resolute nod, Alicia slowly began to tell the story of her past life. Of the lonely child she had once cared for and comforted with all her heart, until that boy finally found his smile again. She had promised she would never leave his side, but then, one night 7 years ago, she had been brutally murdered in her sleep. But then, she said, I awakened in this brand new body. It's a miracle, she said, that the person I thought I'd never see again is now standing right in front of me. The months spent running, keeping her heart locked away, finally crumbled completely. Alicia, bashful, looked straight into Thierry's crimson eyes. Your Majesty, do you recognize me? So it really is you, Rari. Thierry's voice came out hoarse, thick with overwhelming emotion. Knowing he had quietly recognized her long ago but had chosen to pretend otherwise, Alicia bowed her head in apology. She feared he would resent her, even come to hate her, for this deception. But before she could even finish speaking, Thierry rushed forward, pulling her tightly into his arms as if trying to press her into his very skin. Thank you for having the courage to tell me the truth. Rari, thank you truly. Hot tears streamed down both their cheeks. Thierry spoke softly, bashfully. I missed you so much it drove me mad. Not a single day passed that I didn't think of you. Thank you for finding your way back to me. Alicia replied just as bashfully, I'm sorry for making you wait so long. After that tearful, joyful reunion, the two of them sat together at a tea table in the garden, gently stroking the wolf-roo, curled up beside them. As Alicia shared the strange story of her life before becoming Rari, she couldn't help but wonder who was truly responsible for her death all those years ago. Thierry's expression suddenly turned deeply serious. That, he said, was the cruel work of the fairy clan. After she vanished, he had met Vakun, the advisor with mixed fairy blood who had lived for over a century. It was Vakun who had revealed that the fairy clan had used dark magic to scatter her physical body, turning her into a lost, wandering soul. Bound by a blood feud with the pure-blooded fairy clan, Vakun and Thierry had joined forces to hunt down their shared enemy ever since. The Emperor's sole purpose had always been to recover her soul. The revelation left Alicia both deeply moved and stunned. But another question rose within her. If the fairy clan truly was hunting her, what was their real objective? Her entire train of thought was shaken to its core when Thierry, deep in thought, revealed that the fairy clan was currently hunting relentlessly for clues about Podia, the goddess who had founded the empire, whose true form was that of a legendary, immortal red dragon. Alicia suddenly recalled her strange dream from not long ago, when the goddess Podia had appeared and smiled, saying, I am you, and you are me. Could it be that she herself had always been the fairy clan's true target, and that their ambitions were directly tied to Podia's power? Was all of this really just a random coincidence? When Alicia recounted Podia's cryptic message about her beloved, a man named Renario, Thierry couldn't hide his shock. Renario Podia, he said, was the name of the very emperor who had founded the nation years ago. The revelation left Alicia utterly stunned. That founding emperor had passed away long ago, so why would Podia entrust his soul to her care? Perhaps the fairy clan was scheming something far beyond their own control. Thierry clenched his fist, his crimson eyes burning with killing intent. Whatever their plot may be, he said, this time I will not let them escape. It's time to put an end to this vicious feud once and for all. Seeing Alicia gazing at him with lingering doubt, his expression softened into a warm smile. Everything unfolding felt so real, so miraculous, that he almost believed he was still lost in a dream. When Thierry gently asked why she had hidden the truth for so long, Alicia lowered her head and confessed her deepest, most hidden fear. At first, I was afraid you would resent me, but even after that misunderstanding was cleared up, I still couldn't bring myself to say it because I was terrified I might suddenly vanish again. The thought of hurting you all over again truly terrified me. Whatever happens, she said, please remember one thing. I will never, ever willingly leave your side. Even if I have to wake up in another body entirely, she promised, I will always find my way back to you. Her heartfelt words shook Thierry to his very core. He quickly reached out and cupped her face in his hands. Don't say things like that. From this moment on, I will protect you no matter the cost. I want to make my feelings absolutely clear. I like you, and I have for a very long time. She asked, bewildered whether that meant a purely platonic soulmate kind of affection. But Thierry moved even closer, his gaze tender as he wrapped her fully in his embrace, firmly denying it. "No," he said. "I love you the way a man loves a woman." Beneath the brilliant sunset painting the sky red, Thierry leaned down and pressed a gentle, cherished kiss to her forehead. "You don't have to answer me right now," he said. "I'll take things slowly until you're ready to open your heart to me." Alicia gazed at him in a daze, wondering, is this truly reality? Or am I simply dreaming a dream far too sweet to be true? At the Duke's estate, the atmosphere grew suffocatingly tense as Rupert flew into a towering rage. He furiously scolded the fake Rari, for despite his public declaration of adoption, Thierry remained utterly indifferent, paying her no mind at all. The impostor stubbornly kept lying, insisting that His Majesty only had eyes for her, and that the rumors about the princess were nothing but empty gossip. But the sly old fox Rupert's patience had finally run out. He shot to his feet, coldly crushing her hopes. "Enough," he said. "This game has dragged on far too long. If the Emperor shows no reaction at all, I see no reason to keep up this adoption charade any longer." In a fit of panic, her true ambitions surfaced, and she turned to threaten him instead. "Are you planning to just discard me?" she said. "If I climb my way to the throne myself, you'll never achieve your own goals." One word from me would be enough for His Majesty to learn the whole truth. Her foolish threat instantly enraged Rupert. He stepped closer, his eyes blazing with murderous intent. "Shut your mouth, you wretch! Who do you think you are to threaten me? If I tell everyone you're a fraud, do you think the world will believe me or you? Think very carefully. You have 2 weeks. If there's no progress by then, your fate won't be the dungeon. It'll be a lifeless corpse." Pushed to the very edge, she walked out into the pouring rain, consumed with bitter resentment. She swore through gritted teeth that she would make the sly old fox pay dearly once she became empress. But Thierry kept his distance from her more than ever, and even the sous-chef Maid had already begun to suspect her true identity after the cucumber test. With time running out, she knew she had to find any way possible to seduce the Emperor. Amid the cold, pouring rain, a mysterious hooded figure suddenly appeared behind her. "Forgive the intrusion, my lady." She warily demanded to know the stranger's identity. The man quietly revealed himself. "Duke Rupert sent me here," he said. "He wishes to offer you one final chance to redeem yourself." Knowing the cunning Duke wouldn't give up on her so easily, the impostor smirked with satisfaction and asked what he was proposing. Beneath the pouring rain, the stranger slowly emerged, revealing the handsome face of Ethan Riyad. He calmly held out a magical bracelet radiating an ominous crimson glow. "Give this to Lady Alicia," he said. "You cannot fail. This is your first and only chance." Back in her room, Alicia's heart still raced uncontrollably as she recalled Thierry's heartfelt confession beneath the sunset. She wondered in disbelief. How could such a dignified, honorable man have carried a one-sided love for her all this time? But before she could even sort through her tangled emotions to face him, the maid Mary rushed in with urgent news. The impostor had suddenly come looking for her. Upon meeting her, the impostor complained that Thierry had grown strangely cold toward her lately, a stark contrast to his initial warmth. Half feigning, half genuinely humbling herself, she begged Alicia for help winning back the Emperor's trust. Recalling Thierry's promise to personally clean up the mess the Duke had created, Alicia decided to pretend to cooperate, curious to see exactly what the impostor was scheming. Seeing Alicia agree to help, the impostor beamed with satisfaction, feigning gratitude as she pulled out an exquisite jewelry box. "As a token of my appreciation," she said, "I have a small gift for you, Princess." "I personally selected this bracelet," she added, "from the palace's finest jewelry shop." Alicia tried to politely decline the strange gift, but before she could react, the impostor moved in a flash, seizing her hand and clasping the blood-red stone bracelet around her wrist. "Please, don't be so formal. My most sincere wish is simply to grow closer to you." The instant the stone bracelet touched her skin, a violent surge of dark magic erupted, and Alicia instantly went limp, her mind plunging into total darkness. At that very moment, the sous-chef Maid arrived carrying a tray of apple pie, secretly planning to test the princess once and for all to confirm her true identity. But what met her eyes instead was a scene of utter chaos, royal knights sprinting frantically into the hall in a panic. Maid rushed over in alarm, and the sight before her left her completely frozen. Alicia had collapsed, lying unconscious in Thierry's arms. The Emperor's crimson eyes blazed with the fiercest fury imaginable. He roared at the trembling imposter standing nearby. What in the hell did you do? Terrified, the imposter sobbed and denied everything, swearing the princess had simply collapsed on her own while they were talking. But the glinting red stone bracelet on Alicia's wrist betrayed the entire truth. The sweet memories of the moment they had finally found each other again. And his heartfelt confession beneath the sunset came rushing back in a painful, overwhelming flood. No, this cannot happen now. We only just found each other again. Thierry clutched her body tightly, screaming out in helpless, unbearable anguish. Rari, please wake up! Don't leave me alone!